The events unfold in the Donghai University building, where a large group of students has already assembled. Linmu pondered his test paper intensely, grumbling about its high difficulty. At that moment, a group of girls walked into the classroom, instantly drawing everyone's attention. The students quickly identified one of them and began whispering about how adorable she was, leading everyone to consider her the campus queen, despite being a freshman. This was Dutch Xiao Yui, who didn't seem thrilled about all the attention focused on her. Nobody could figure out why she was in this class, as it was filled with sophomores only. It turned out she was betrothed to a guy from this class, someone her friends found rather dull. Ultimately, the girl herself declared she'd prefer to stay single than wed that trash. They all paused near the desk of the main character, who showed no reaction to his fiancée's presence. One of the girls stepped forward and approached the spot where the guy was seated. She forcefully slammed her hand on the desk to finally grab his attention. She insisted on taking the seat with her friends, but Linmu pointed out there were plenty of empty desks at the back where they could sit. She didn't care about his suggestion, as it was her habit to claim a seat right there. The girl quickly noticed that our hero was struggling with even a basic problem, so she boldly took the front desk, even though it wasn't necessary for him. The guy couldn't respond, as she was unfortunately speaking the plain truth. He glanced at Dutch Xiao Yui, who remained completely unbothered by the scene unfolding before her. At that moment, another person stepped into their exchange and tapped our hero on the shoulder. It was a classmate who thought it was only right to grant the request of such a striking girl. Eventually, the protagonist realized he couldn't resist the mounting pressure, so he began gathering his belongings to relocate. All the students watched closely as the defeated young man vacated his desk. He passed by Dutch Xiao Yui, casting a quick look at her face, which still betrayed no emotion. Suddenly, the girl raised her voice sharply, calling the protagonist a coward with clear disdain. Her friend couldn't believe someone like our hero could even get into Donghai University and speculated he must have had some connections. In truth, Dutch Xiao Yui didn't care where the young man studied, as long as she could enter engagement with him. After Linmu finished his classes, he wandered alone through the city's evening streets, heading toward his home. Despite his indifference to his future bride, the young man found it hard to stomach such treatment. He couldn't shake the memory of the girl coldly labeling him a coward. The guy himself was also unhappy about the engagement, as it had been entirely arranged by his parents. The main character decided to push these troubles out of his mind and focus on getting home to check on his grandfather's condition. Climbing into the arriving cab, he hoped the old man was recovering well by now. It wasn't long before he reached the Grand Lin family mansion, which appeared quite majestic. Linmu approached the door and called out to his grandfather, announcing his return. The young man was about to step inside but halted suddenly when he heard odd noises. He instantly recognized the shouts and realized his family was arguing again. The protagonist reluctantly noted that all his relatives were already present at the gathering. The atmosphere grew tense, everyone froze, and a heavy silence filled with unspoken complaints settled over the scene. The first to welcome the young man was Linmu's aunt, who shared that Grandpa had gone to the hospital for a checkup and would return shortly. Linmu wasn't shocked by this news and calmly responded that he'd head to his room. He quietly passed by the men, who remained seated in silence on the couch. The first to speak up was Linmu's elder uncle, who was irritated that his nephew had entirely forgotten his manners by not greeting them. The second uncle, Lin Yif, didn't even think they should bother with this guy, and murmured with a sly grin that the protagonist's days were numbered anyway. At lunch the next day, Linmu met with his grandfather and told him he'd be free from classes for a few days, allowing him to look after the old man. Grandpa was naturally delighted to hear that the young man could spend more time with him. The boy felt deep sorrow for the old man's condition, as had been in poor health since our hero's parents passed away, leaving uncertainty about his recovery. Auntie broke into the conversation, noting that Linmu and Grandpa needed to head to dinner in just a few minutes. Soon, the entire Lin family was seated around the same table. The first to speak was Uncle Lin Yidi, who chose to address all pressing matters immediately. He mentioned they were planning an auction soon, but he still needed authorization to oversee the arrangements, as there had been recent issues with the process. The man believed now was the perfect moment to place the auction department under his control. The other brother argued that if Lin Yute was struggling with the organization, he shouldn't be involved and offered his own assistance. At that point, the main character suddenly stood up from his seat, declared he was full, and said he was going to his room. No one even noticed the young man leave the table as a heated dispute over the auction house erupted. Lin Mu entered his room wearily, exhausted from hearing all the yelling. Our hero stepped onto the balcony and reflected on how his parents had passed away far too soon. He longed for his mom and dad to witness how the family was gradually falling apart. These events weighed heavily on the main character, who was now struggling deeply. Meanwhile, one of the uncles decided to check on the boy, suspecting he was having a tough time. The man guessed that our hero was missing his parents again. Lin Mu wasn't particularly pleased with the stranger's presence and asked if the uncle needed something from him. The uncle had no specific request for the protagonist. He was simply concerned that the boy hadn't eaten enough at dinner. The man began talking about how only Lin Mu's father had inherited their father's skills. Unfortunately, their brother became consumed with studying antiques, disregarding their grandfather's wish for him to take over the family business. Even when he did take charge, it didn't benefit the family. Eventually, the uncle chose to end the conversation, stating that people shouldn't take on what they can't handle, or it would lead to chaos. Lin Mu turned sharply, his brows furrowed, unable to grasp what the uncle meant by those words. The uncle didn't bother to clarify and suddenly pushed the protagonist hard in the back. The main character lost his balance and tumbled over the balcony's edge. The wind howled in his ears as the boy watched in terror as the ground rushed closer. His body hit the pavement with a sickening crunch, a scarlet pool quickly spreading across the asphalt. Meanwhile, the uncle coldly observed what had happened to his nephew, calling it a small gift to help his son reunite with his parents. Moments later, the rest of the family saw that Lin Mu had fallen from the balcony. Now, the scene shifts to the doctor's office, where the staff was completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Suddenly, an anxious nurse, who had been searching for Dr. Zhou, burst in, reporting that they had a patient who had fallen from a balcony. The head doctor recognized the gravity of the situation and instructed her to approach the injured person immediately. Meanwhile, the protagonist was already in the emergency room, surrounded by a group of doctors frantically working to save his life. It was clear from the boy's condition that he was gravely injured, his life hanging by a thread. Dr. Zhou quickly asked about the patient's status. One of the doctors reported that the boy had fallen from the 4th floor, with severe internal bleeding, but a colleague skilled in acupuncture might be able to help. The girl knew a potentially effective method, though it carried risks. The chief physician understood the danger, but insisted the patient needed to be saved immediately. Miss Zhou followed her boss' orders, gripping her needles tightly and announcing she would begin at once. Within seconds, several needles were inserted into the protagonist's head, offering a final chance for survival. The nurse promptly reported that the patient's condition had stabilized. Dr. Zhou explained that she used needles to induce a state of bay or run, but if it persisted too long, the young man's brain could shut down, so she left the rest to her colleagues. The doctors prepared for surgery to seize the moment. Suddenly, they noticed the patient's heart rate had spiked dangerously above normal. The head doctor began to suspect that Dr. Zhou's technique hadn't worked after all, and shouted for his assistant to prepare the defibrillator for emergencies. Metal plates were pressed against the boy's chest, and a sharp 200-watt discharge jolted his body violently. The doctor monitored the patient's vitals, but nothing was working, so they increased the charge to 300 watts. The next moment, the machine's beeping signaled that Lin Mu had lost all signs of life, marking the operation as a failure. Dr. Zhou was about to remove her mask and ask her colleagues to notify the patient's guardians of his death. The nurse agreed to fulfill the girl's request, but couldn't tear her eyes away from the patient they couldn't save. The doctors covered our hero's lifeless body for transport to the morgue. Afterward, they left the operating room to handle other matters. None of the hospital staff suspected that a dark sphere had appeared above Lin Mu's body at that moment. The next instant, a glowing spark of light emerged in the room, seemingly searching for our hero. It circled his body briefly before plunging sharply into his chest. The young man's body was already cooling, his soul hovering above, leaving only an empty shell. The unknown force refused to let the protagonist go so easily, seizing his soul with a ghostly grip. The spectral fist tightened, preparing to drive a spark of life back into Linmu's cold flesh. As the arm vanished, the main character's body slowly rose, floating above the operating table. Gradually, this mysterious power began to merge with Linmu, determined to restore his life. A massive, enigmatic ring appeared on the boy's index finger. Eventually, the fusion process completed, and for a few seconds, the young man hung motionless in midair. The protagonist remained unaware of the extraordinary and mysterious events that had transpired that night. The next morning, Dr. Joe returned to her workplace, standing by the door of one of the offices. Her eyelids drooped heavily, her weary expression revealing a sleepless night filled with anxious thoughts about her patient's death. A scream shattered the air, startling the doctor, her eyes clearing instantly. She leapt from her seat and rushed toward the source of the screams to investigate. Soon, Miss Joe burst into one of the wards, where she encountered terrified nurses and asked what had happened. The girls struggled to explain, simply stating they had seen something utterly terrifying. The doctor immediately scanned the room to understand what could have occurred overnight. She approached the body of the main character, who was still lying unconscious. It turned out the entire hospital staff was stunned to discover that the patient had somehow grown overnight. At that moment, Dr. Joe decided to conduct a thorough examination of the body, as everything seemed too unusual. Only now did she notice that the patient's body remained warm, raising even more questions. The girl chose to check our hero's breathing with her finger to confirm her suspicions. Finally, Linmu awoke from a prolonged slumber that could have been eternal. Dr. Joe was unsure how to react to such an event, and Howell was equally stunned. Meanwhile, the nurses, now terrified, believed the living dead had come for them. The doctor urged her colleagues to stay calm, explaining that they shouldn't be shocked, as the patient might have experienced clinical death. The protagonist was now sitting on the operating table, wondering who all these people around him were. The young man glanced around, his eyes scanning unfamiliar walls as his mind desperately grasped at fragments of memories. He struggled to recall any details about the events that had transpired. In the end, Linmu realized he couldn't even remember who he was. After regaining consciousness, he was moved to ICU room number 303. Dr. Joe was so astonished by the situation that she stayed close to this remarkable patient. The girl began to suspect that the needles might have damaged a point responsible for memory. She theorized that the injury could be so severe that he had literally forgotten his own name. The doctor reassured our hero not to worry, confident that his memories would eventually return. She informed him that Linmu could press a button to summon a nurse if he needed anything. Eventually, she left the protagonist alone, as she had other matters to attend to. The boy was left in complete silence, allowing him to rest after such a grueling night. When he awoke, he realized he couldn't sense any spiritual chi in this place, and his body felt weaker than ever. It seemed someone else had occupied his body, using the last of its chi to escape and create a new form for themselves, or else they would have perished. He never imagined that the greatest cultivator in the world would meet such an end. The young man was furious at the Xuantian and Yugi sects for their audacity, vowing to return to the cultivation world to confront every last one of them. Meanwhile, the Lin family mansion had received the latest news from the hospital. One of the uncles behind the incident was furious that his nephew was still alive. His subordinate reported that the boy survived but had no memory, which slightly reassured the man, so he instructed him to handle everything, promising a generous reward. Linmu's aunt, Lin Rong, couldn't understand what was happening, as it was previously said that Linmu couldn't possibly survive. Apparently, the brother had no answers either, only knowing that the young man had lived but lost his memory. Upon hearing this, the woman began to hope their nephew was now a mere vegetable. Her uncle chuckled at her confusion of memory loss with complete paralysis. Lin Rong wondered what would become of them now and suggested they needed to adjust their plans. The man understood that his sister was the closest to Linmu, so he asked her to visit and check on the boy, emphasizing that they shouldn't reveal themselves until they confirmed the extent of his memory loss. Meanwhile, Limu sat quietly in his room, unaware of the schemes being plotted against him. The silence was broken by a knock at the door, and the young man promptly invited his guests inside. The protagonist couldn't grasp what was happening, so he asked Dr. Joe the reason for her visit. The girl explained that someone had come to see him and asked if he recognized the person. Pointing to the bandage on his head, Limu stressed that in his condition, he couldn't remember anyone. Lin Rong pretended to be hurt by his words, but the young man simply apologized, saying he had no recollection of her. She told her nephew not to worry and advised him to rest to recover quickly, promising to visit again later. She also asked the doctor why the boy looked different somehow. The girl explained that our hero's face was injured from the fall, requiring minor surgery. Lin Rong thanked the doctors for their efforts and asked them to care for her nephew, though in her mind, she was already rejoicing that Linmu had indeed forgotten everything. A few days later, the young man was still in his room, trying to learn about this world. Our hero discovered that humanity had existed here for only 5,000 years, yet its spiritual chi was remarkably weak. Thanks to a book he found, he was slowly beginning to understand this place. Dr. Joe reported that the protagonist was nearly healed and could soon be discharged. Linmu sincerely thanked the doctor for the care and support she had shown him throughout these days. The girl chuckled, noting that the young man acted as if he came from some ancient era. Embarrassed, he realized she had uncovered his secret love for martial arts stories. The doctor urged our hero to complete his discharge to spend time with family and friends, hoping it would help restore his memory. Following the doctor's instructions, Limu headed toward the hospital exit. A cab was waiting to take the young man to his destination. He was genuinely surprised that this world had so little spiritual chi, yet humanity had advanced significantly without it. Soon, the car stopped outside the main entrance to Donghai University. The protagonist checked his pockets and realized they were empty. The cab driver informed him that the fare was 50, but Linmu had no way to pay. He explained that he had just left the hospital, leaving him without money. The driver was stunned, as he hadn't expected this from a student of Donghai University, where the wealthiest and brightest studied. He suggested that our hero call a friend to cover the fare. The young man grew embarrassed, unsure if he even had any friends. The protagonist was at a loss, as he didn't know anyone at this university. Suddenly, a girl appeared at the car window, seeming to recognize Linmu and noting they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Linmu saw this as a perfect chance to resolve the situation, so he explained his predicament and asked his friend to pay for the cab. The girl didn't mind helping and assumed her friend had been in the hospital for plastic surgery. The protagonist asked her to pay first so he could exit the car and explain everything properly. They strolled around the university campus together, after which Linmu described how he ended up in the hospital. He also mentioned falling from his own balcony, which seemed particularly strange given everything else. Hearing that he remembered nothing, the girl realized he had forgotten not only the events but also her. The protagonist was instantly embarrassed and apologized for not recalling his longtime friend. She asked if the doctors had mentioned any way to restore Linmu's memories. The young man hadn't heard of any such method but hoped his memory would return. The girl noted with a hint of sadness that memory loss might not be so bad, as sometimes she wished she could forget everything. At that moment, they encountered Dutch Xiao Yui, accompanied by her friends as usual. The girl averted her gaze from the protagonist, who inspired nothing but disgust in her. For a brief moment, her eyes fell on the young man's face, and she immediately noticed a change in Linmu. Dutch Xiao Yui instantly assumed our hero had undergone plastic surgery. The young man grew embarrassed, as she wasn't the first to notice, and tried again to clarify the situation. His friend stepped into the conversation, confirming that Linmu had indeed had surgery and remarked that he looked quite handsome. Dutch Xiao Yui only laughed off the young man's choice and stressed that she still wouldn't marry some lowlife, even after surgery. The protagonist then realized that the previous owner of his body was engaged to this woman. Linmu immediately proposed breaking off their engagement, as he had no objections to such a move. Dutch Xiao Yui and the friend were stunned that the young man had made such a bold decision so suddenly. Linmu confidently declared that he would never want to marry someone like her. Naturally, the university's main beauty tried to act unfazed by such words and only remarked that it was quite courageous of the young man. He wanted to end the engagement completely so the girl would never bother him again. In turn, the protagonist's friend laughed and supported such a daring choice. Limu was frustrated with this kind of attitude and now hoped he would never cross paths with Dutch Xiaoyui again. The girl couldn't take her eyes off the young man she had previously deemed a loser, as she hadn't expected such a drastic change. Meanwhile, his friend was thrilled for our hero, who had finally achieved a small act of revenge. Now the young man learned that before his memory loss, he was a weak and depressed individual, easily bullied and humiliated by others. The friend emphasized that it wasn't just intimidation but genuine shame each time. The protagonist realized that Dutch Xiaoyui had always wanted to end the engagement herself, and he had simply let her go for nothing. The friend believed this girl was unworthy of more and wondered what Linmu would do next. She thought he might regret his decision, as his fiancée was the university's queen, but in truth, he didn't care at all. The girl decided to wrap up the conversation and advised our hero to steer clear of Dutch Xiaoyui in the future. She also promised to guide him to his class, as it was clear he didn't even remember that. On their way, someone hurled a sharp dart toward our heroes, which halted just inches from the girl's eye. Fortunately, her friend had honed reflexes and easily caught it with 2 fingers. It was Chinhao, whom the girl had repeatedly warned not to play with darts in class to avoid injuring classmates. The boy was genuinely frightened, having angered Tangbei, who was also the class head, and promised it wouldn't happen again. The girl stressed that her classmates' skills weren't impressive enough to show off in public. She decided to use the dart she caught to demonstrate proper technique. In the end, Tangbei struck the target with astonishing precision, leaving no room for error. The protagonist was amazed by this accuracy, noting it rivaled the level of the Foundation dimension. After that, the class head reintroduced their classmate Limu to everyone. She explained that he had been injured, causing memory loss, and urged his classmates to help him recover his memories. All the students greeted the main character with enthusiastic applause to offer him some support. Limu noticed that Tangbei wasn't such a bad person and was quite popular in their class. His introduction was suddenly interrupted by a knock at the classroom door. Moments later, the teacher, about to begin the lesson, entered the room. The woman, smiling, asked her students if she had missed anything significant. Linmu immediately assumed it was another classmate arriving late. Tangbei burst into laughter because her friend had mistaken instructor Xiang Ju for a student. The protagonist was surprised by this mix-up, and meanwhile, the teacher asked the student to accompany her since he had returned to the university. The class head wasn't pleased that her classmate was ignoring the teacher and shouted for him to hurry up and go with Miss Song. Song Ling-ro had already heard about what happened to the young man and asked if he was okay. Linmu thanked the teacher for her concern and replied that he was fully recovered. She was glad to hear such news and added that he could always visit her office if he needed help. The young man appreciated the offer, but their conversation was cut short by another knock on the door. It was Tangbei, who came to check if they had finished talking, as she wanted to have lunch with our hero. Mrs. Song reported that they were done, so the students could head to lunch, and she thanked Bei for her assistance. The girl was delighted by her teacher's praise and felt it was her duty to help as Limu's classmate. Meanwhile, the protagonist stood up without a word and headed for the exit. Song Ling-ro watched the students leave and thought that not only had the young man's appearance changed, but his personality seemed different too. On the way to the cafeteria, our hero decided to comment on how well his friend threw the dart, suggesting she must train a lot. Tangbei explained that, with her training at home, the simple trick came naturally to her and asked if the young man wanted to practice. Excited by the offer despite his memory loss, he replied that training would be good for him. The friend examined the protagonist closely and immediately noticed his body was stronger than before. The changes were significant, as if Linmu had trained rigorously for a long time. The girl didn't realize that falling from a balcony could have such a positive effect, but the young man wasn't thrilled, as he had nearly died. She agreed that it certainly wasn't worth his near-death experience. Seeing his friend become upset thinking about it, he asked her not to take it so seriously. Then Tangbei grew curious about what our hero planned to do next. Linmu calmly responded that he had no plans, as he couldn't recall anything from his past. The girl tried to find a positive angle, asking with a smirk if he had ever wanted to live his life differently. The protagonist froze in confusion, realizing he had never tackled such a profound question before. Tang Bei revealed that the old Linmu was an introverted weakling who couldn't stand up for himself and was constantly bullied by people like Dutch Xiaoyui. In contrast, the current Linmu not only looked different, but had a completely transformed personality. The girl believed this accident was a divine chance for him to change and start anew. She suggested he seize the opportunity, given his newly enhanced body. The young man, surprised, asked his friend what he needed to do to change his life. A slight smile appeared on Tang Bei's face, as she seemed to have a plan ready. She asked if he had ever heard of a mysterious organization called the Dragon Protectors. The protagonist was taken aback by the strange name. The girl explained that she needed to mention the martial arts world first. She directly asked if Linmu believed in people who could kill with mere leaves. The young man immediately assumed these warriors used spiritual qi and confidently replied that he believed it. The girl earnestly warned her friend that such people were hard to find. She shared a legend about masters who reached the Xiantan dimension, noting that even her grandfather had once come close but was defeated by his inner demons, losing all his cultivation. Thankfully, he survived, to the joy of their family. The main character urged Bei not to be sad, as her grandfather's survival was what mattered most. The girl listened to Linmu and mentioned that their Tang family had many talented individuals, hoping someone would reach the Xiantan dimension. The cultivator was surprised to hear of a familiar organization and thought his friend might be part of the Sichuan Tang. Tang Bei laughed and playfully poked his forehead, amused that he likened her to the Tang sect from martial arts novels. She confirmed that their sect of poison and hidden weapon masters existed beyond fiction. At the organization's peak, they had several Xiantan experts who were formidable warriors. Linmu hadn't expected this and immediately asked how powerful these people were. The girl, drawing from her grandfather's tales, explained that all techniques were crafted by these fighters. Our hero deduced that these Yin experts matched the Foundation Dimension level and asked if such masters were in their sect. His friend clarified that the Dragon Protectors were established by the Xia government for special missions, which is why some sects sent disciples to the team to advance faster. Even Tang Bei herself coached such a team. The protagonist hesitated, unsure if he could join without being in a sect. The girl reassured him that his potential, combined with proper training, would make him no weaker than their recruits and asked if he wanted to join the Dragon Protectors. Linmu pondered whether to make such a spontaneous decision. In the end, the bold young man firmly stated that he wanted to live a different life. Their conversation ended there, and the events shifted to late at night. The protagonist found himself outside the grand building of Tang Long Corporation. The young man was surprised that the organization's base was in the city center. Tang Bei saw no issue, as it was ideal for housing a key government agency, allowing quick responses in emergencies. The young man realized his comment was foolish and agreed that his friend was right. Soon, they were inside the Tang Long Corporation building, heading toward the elevator to reach the upper floors. Seeing the massive scale, our hero realized this was the organization's base. Meanwhile, the girl pulled out her card to verify her identity. Swiping it across the elevator panel, which required special identification. A second later, a notification appeared on the screen, indicating that the required files were loading. Tang Bei began entering the necessary information while explaining that Tang Long Corporation was merely a front. She asked the protagonist to wait a moment to see its true scope. Unfamiliar with such technology, the cultivator was startled when the elevator began descending rapidly. A second later, a bell signaled they had reached the correct floor. When the elevator doors opened, Tang Bei announced they had arrived at the Dragon Protector's base. Beneath the ground was a vast room where numerous organization employees worked. The girl wasted no time and led her friend to the office of one of the Dragon Protector's leaders. The man sensed an unfamiliar presence and woke from his sleep. Surprised by the late visit, he immediately asked what Bei was doing there at such an hour. Meanwhile, our hero noticed a glow of spiritual qi from the old man, indicating he had surpassed the Foundation Dimension and reached the energy-gathering dimension, though he was still far from the next level. Tang Bei explained to Uncle Yang that she had brought a rare martial arts genius, a person of extraordinary talent rarely found among thousands of masters. The man was annoyed, thinking the girl was joking by introducing her boyfriend, and insisted it was too late for him to learn martial arts. She quickly clarified that he wasn't her boyfriend and suggested the leader test the main character's skills himself. Uncle Yang couldn't resist sweet Tang Bei and decided to trust her words. He approached the young man, placed a hand confidently on his shoulder, and looked intently into his face. To his amazement, the man found that the boy had an exceptionally strong body, despite lacking martial arts skills. Tang Bei was thrilled, as her claims were validated, and added that Lin Mu used to be ordinary, but after the fall, his body had become far stronger. Uncle Yang's eyes widened in disbelief, as it sounded utterly impossible. The young man himself didn't fully understand, as the hospital had tried everything but couldn't explain the reasons for these changes. The leader of the organization realized that our hero was already aware of the dragon protectors, so he promptly invited him to join. Lin Mu didn't hesitate and agreed immediately. The man explained that the young man must pass a test to become part of the team, warning that leaving the organization afterward wouldn't be easy. The protagonist had already heard this from his friend Tang Bei before arriving, so he had made up his mind long ago and was determined to join. Uncle Yang was pleased with this response and announced that he would begin preparing the test, confident that Lin Mu's talent would help him pass all challenges. He handed the young man a book detailing a breath-holding technique, instructing him to burn it after reading, as leaking the information was strictly forbidden. The man stressed that our hero should follow the book's instructions and, once mastered, seek out Uncle Yang. Lin Mu thanked the leader for the provided materials and firmly grasped the book. Tang Bei, ensuring all details were settled, suggested that Lin Mu's trial begin, to which Uncle Yang gave his approval. As the young man left the office, the leader chuckled with satisfaction, having gained such a capable fighter. He was convinced that Tang Bei had brought him a prodigy, and the Donghai branch would soon have a new expert. After meeting with the Dragon Protector's leader, the protagonist headed to the dormitory. Lin Mu sat and diligently studied the breath-holding technique to join the organization as quickly as possible. He remained puzzled about why Lu Shuyang's spiritual qi was so unusual and speculated it might be due to the weak energy in this world. At that moment, the mysterious ring reappeared on his index finger. In an instant, it fully materialized and absorbed all nearby energy. It seemed this piece of jewelry was the only remnant from the cultivator's world, so he wondered when he could access the items stored within it. Ultimately, the young man decided to search for information about it in the library. As soon as the sun rose, the protagonist followed his plan and was already at the library by morning, holding a heavy stack of books. He settled at the nearest empty table and began flipping through pages, seeking the information he needed. The silence was abruptly shattered by a noise, causing the young man to flinch and look up from his book. It was Dutch Xiao Yui, visibly upset because another guy was hitting on her. The girl coldly warned Wang Dong to leave her alone, adding scornfully that his family's wealth held no value in her eyes. The young man persisted, believing they were a perfect match from the same social circle. Dutch Xiao Yui was annoyed by his arrogance and emphasized that the Wang family's legacy would never pass to him. After making it clear she wasn't interested, she turned and walked away from Wang Dong. The guy was so persistent that he kept harassing her and mocked her engagement to a loser from the Lin family. Everyone had heard that Lin Mu was a complete failure, so Wang Dong felt he couldn't possibly be with such a beauty. It was challenging for the girl to control her emotions around such an unpleasant person. Meanwhile, the main character paid no attention to the exchange between the two. Wang Dong noticed his rival nearby and decided to confront Lin Mu himself. The young man continued to act as if he couldn't see or hear anything, refusing to pause his reading. The bully was delighted that our hero lacked manners, took a bold step toward him, and, staring into his eyes, asked if he had a problem for avoiding even a glance in his direction. Lin Mu didn't even know if he recognized this person, so he simply asked what Wang Dong wanted. The bully then threatened Lin Mu to quickly break off his engagement with Dutch Xiao Yui. The young man replied that they had already canceled it, so the girl's affairs no longer concerned him. Surprised, the bully turned to Dutch Xiao Yui and asked if it was true. The beauty seized the opportunity and quietly lied, claiming it wasn't the case at all. Wang Dong couldn't tolerate the thought that the protagonist had deceived him, so he angrily snatched the book from his hands. Caught off guard, the young man let the book slip, and it crashed to the floor with a thud. Wang Dong was furious that Linmu dared to lie and vowed he would pay for it. Linmu remained unfazed by the threat and merely hummed indifferently. The protagonist wouldn't tolerate such treatment, so he swiftly grabbed the bully, who still wouldn't back off. With a stern look, he asked what Wang Dong planned to do. The bold young man didn't hesitate and decided to teach the bully a lesson, as Wang Dong couldn't respond. The bully, a pitiful weakling, clumsily collapsed to the floor. Wang Dong struggled to stand after the protagonist's harsh lesson. Unsatisfied with the humiliation, Linmu kicked him with cold precision and then roughly stepped on his chest. After disarming his opponent, the protagonist turned to Dutch Xiaoyui and directly asked if she still needed the engagement. The girl reiterated that it was never her desire, but defying their family's elders was too difficult. Linmu hadn't considered how much Dutch Xiaoyui's behavior had annoyed him before. He then turned to Wang Dong, who had overheard everything, and explained that technically they were still engaged, so the bully should stay away. Wang Dong raised his voice, asking if the protagonist knew who he was. Linmu didn't care and pressed down harder on Wang Dong. The daredevil yelped in pain, now begging our hero to let him go, promising to leave. In the end, Linmu released him and ordered him to vanish from his sight. The arrogant bully, unaccustomed to such humiliation, silently left the library without responding. The resentment ran deep, and he was already plotting revenge against the bold young man who had acted so brazenly. Meanwhile, a loud commotion erupted around them, as no one expected a fight in the university library. One student was furious that someone dared to make noise and fight in such a place. The main character promptly apologized, claiming a student had merely bumped into the table. He tried to fix the situation by rearranging the furniture. Dutch Xiaoyui noted that the young man had truly changed, as he would never have done such a thing before. Linmu thought this might be for the best, as it would mean fewer problems. Despite her dislike for her fiancé, the girl warned him that Wang Dong was the type to hold eternal grudges. The protagonist only smiled faintly at this information and thanked her for the warning. Turning back, his gaze fell on the book the bully had snatched, and a line caught his eye about finishing what one started in case enemies return. He realized he had mastered the technique and decided it was time to find Lu Shouyang for something new. That evening, the scene shifted to the Wang family home, where another scandal was brewing. Wang Dong's father was furious that his subordinates hadn't provided useful information despite being well paid and waiting a week. All the staff claimed Linmu was just a weakling and coward, but the issue was that he somehow broke the young master's arm. They all reported seeing him as a completely different person before. The family head grew intrigued upon hearing about this sudden change. One subordinate revealed they had bribed a servant from the Lin family, who said that after the incident, the young man lost his memory and became like this, even stopping visits home. Mr. Wang decided to act decisively and ordered his fighters to bring Linmu in, no matter what. The guards lined up and unanimously accepted the order. The old man wasn't intimidated by some loser like Linmu, despite his family, as he had personally wronged him. The next morning, unaware of the hunt against him, the protagonist arrived at the university as usual. Linmu began to sense a tense atmosphere, hinting something was amiss. Suddenly, a suspicious small van blocked his path. A group of hooligans emerged, specifically seeking our hero. Their ringleader, smirking, announced that their boss wanted to invite Linmu for a cup of tea. The young man hadn't expected this, as he certainly didn't know their boss. The thugs grew impatient with his delays and ordered him to come with them or face a beating. Ultimately, our hero agreed to their terms to avoid another conflict, convinced that the Wang family indeed relished revenge. Linmu wasn't afraid and thought it might even be an opportunity to engage in such a challenge. Soon, Mr. Wang was informed that the target had arrived. Exhaling cigar smoke, he ordered his subordinates to bring the young man to him. A guard silently turned and left to carry out the boss orders. Minutes later, a knock sounded at the door, and the gentleman invited the guests in. It was clearly Limu, escorted by several guards. The man immediately asked if the young man knew what he had gotten himself into, but Limu feigned ignorance. The family head then provided a hint, revealing that Wang Dong was his son. The protagonist boldly suggested that the beaten boy had complained to his father, who now sought revenge. Mr. Wang laughed at our hero's audacity, as no one had ever dared speak to him so brazenly. He stated he would respect Linmu's family and let him go if he severed his tendons. The protagonist stood firm, asking what would happen if he refused. One guard placed a hand on his shoulder, advising him not to complicate things. Linmu didn't appreciate the treatment and elbowed the Wang family subordinate. He grabbed the guard's arm, asserting that they were here to talk, so no one should interfere. The protagonist was so strong that he easily overpowered even the most seasoned fighter. The subordinate crashed to the ground, breaking a table beneath him. Mr. Wang noted that the young man had impressive techniques, but was certain Linmu couldn't handle multiple fighters at once. The protagonist, undeterred, kept a confident smile. The man, enraged by such insolence, ordered his men to tear him apart. Our hero challenged all opponents to attack together, as time was short. He assumed a fighting stance, eager to dispatch the guards quickly and confront their boss. The guards attacked, but Limu masterfully felled each with a single, precise strike. In 10 seconds, he had defeated every guard and was calmly adjusting his suit. Mr. Wang was stunned, having trusted his subordinate's strength. The young man suggested a unknown talk, as he and his son had wasted too much of his time, which needed compensation. Terrified, the man claimed it was all their fault and offered 20 million as compensation. Linmu didn't want money gained dishonestly. The frightened old man insisted it was earned cleanly. The protagonist chose to trust Mr. Wang, pulled a credit card from his jacket, and asked him to transfer the amount. The old man agreed, but needed a computer. Linmu allowed him to approach his desk, where Mr. Wang quickly entered the information and confirmed the transfer. He showed that the money had reached our hero's card and invited him to verify it. The young man thanked him for his cooperation, while Mr. Wang secretly reached into a desk drawer. Staring at Linmu, he pulled out a gun and suggested they continue their chat. Seeing the weapon, the protagonist fell silent. The old man mocked that the young man's earlier confidence had vanished. Linmu, still fearless, smirked smugly and swiftly knocked over the table where Mr. Wang sat, throwing him off balance. Unprepared, the family head dropped the gun. Our hero asked if it was worth it, stating that the man had just sealed his own fate. Mr. Wang tried to excuse it as a misunderstanding, claiming he only wanted to talk. The young man, certain trust was impossible, refused to engage further. He warned that if he wanted to kill Mr. Wang, he'd do it now, advising him not to provoke him. The man pleaded not to escalate tensions between their families and promised to fulfill any of the young master's orders. Intrigued by the opportunity for revenge, Linmu swiftly grabbed Mr. Wang's neck in a fit of rage, intending to teach him a harsh lesson. He forced a white pill into the old man's mouth, who didn't resist. Mr. Wang swallowed the mysterious object and immediately clutched his throat, yelling at our hero for giving him an unknown pill. It was a poison from martial arts novels called Hanshaong Budian, and Linmu promised an antidote every 3 months if the man behaved. He warned that Mr. Wang could face a painful death and urged him to choose his actions carefully. At that moment, the protagonist's phone rang as he was about to leave Mr. Wang's office. It was Tang Bei, who had lost track of her friend and asked him to come to the base urgently for an assignment. Soon, Linmu arrived at the Tang Long Corporation building, where his friend awaited. Most staff had gathered in the hall, whispering about something significant. Upon meeting Tang Bei, the protagonist quickly asked what had happened. She reported that their organization had captured a mercenary group's leader, prompting his subordinates to take 20 hostages, demanding his release. The situation had escalated, with the mercenaries planning to attack the Pearl Tower, requiring immediate action. Linmu asked if there was a plan, and the girl explained their main goal was to rescue the hostages and assist other units. The young man realized that just the two of them would handle the rescue. Tang Bei clarified that if they had enough people, they wouldn't need recruits. She instructed our hero to locate the hostages and informed the elders of their position. Meanwhile, the Dragon Protector's leader addressed his subordinates with utmost seriousness, stressing the mission's importance and ordering all fighters to move out immediately. Following the order, our hero headed to the west district of Donghai City. He leapt across rooftops to conceal his location. He grew suspicious, sensing many people nearby, yet all rooms seemed empty. Eventually, he jumped off a building to survey the area better. Limu hid near a window to observe the building's interior. He saw lights on, but couldn't spot anyone. Only then did he realize the issue. The young man approached a nearby hatch to inspect the entrance. He sensed the enemies were hiding underground. With effort, Linmu lifted the heavy hatch to enter the base. He immediately spotted a glow, confirming his suspicions. Beneath the trapdoors was a large staircase leading underground. A guard stood near the entrance, vigilantly scanning for intruders. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him, though no visitors were expected. All he saw was a pair of legs flying toward his head. Limu masterfully subdued his first opponent with a leg grab. The guard tried to call for help, but the young man squeezed his neck tightly, making it impossible. The opponent wheezed helplessly, unable to move as Linmu's iron grip tightened. The enemy collapsed like a rag doll, and Limu stepped off him gracefully, landing softly. The protagonist quickly removed the guard's uniform, unbuckling straps with honed dexterity. He changed into the attire, blending in perfectly with the guards, his mask concealing his face. Linmu wasted no time and headed to the boss room to report an issue at the base, hoping to lure out the main target. A massive figure emerged from behind the door, demanding to know what had happened. Our hero closely observed the boss' actions, struggling to come up with a response. Meanwhile, the leader reached for his gun, suspecting something was off with this guard. Linmu reacted swiftly, grabbing his hand to seize the weapon. The boss wasn't an easy opponent, quickly regrouping and attempting a knee strike. The young man anticipated the attack and countered in time. The bandit's leg fractured with a crack, as Linmu's body was far stronger than it appeared. The fighter let out a gut-wrenching scream, his body writhing in pain. He collapsed with a thud, clutching his broken leg while still gripping the gun. The gang leader pointed the weapon at the protagonist and fearfully demanded his identity. The thug aimed at Linmu, ordering him to reveal his name, but he remained silent. Realizing this opponent wouldn't be easy, Linmu struck again with his knee. The bandit, weakened by his injuries and pain, couldn't block the attack. His consciousness faded like a burned-out bulb, and his body slumped out of the fight. The protagonist scanned the room and realized the hostages were right there. In the corner, his eyes caught two worn bags without markings. The young man quickly approached and unzipped them without hesitation. Inside was a mountain of cash. Linmu was shocked that these people had stolen so much money, all in cash. A new idea struck him, as the hostages didn't yet know his identity. He zipped the bags, gripped their handles tightly, and prepared to flee, seeing a chance to get rich. One of the girls, unimpressed by the protagonist's actions, suspected he had killed the guard just to take the money. The sharp-witted girl noticed something interesting. Our hero had left a gun on the floor, which could be her chance. She performed a few skillful somersaults, swiftly grabbing the weapon. Undaunted, the brave hostage aimed at Linmu and ordered him not to move. Our hero sighed heavily, realizing he couldn't leave so easily. He explained that he wasn't there to harm the hostages and allowed them to leave. The girl understood his intentions, but, as a police officer, couldn't let a villain escape. She ordered him to drop the bags and put his hands behind his head. Linmu, unfazed, offered to split the loot in half, pretending they hadn't seen each other. The hostage refused to back down, repeating her order to drop the bags or face being shot. The protagonist realized she wasn't joking, so he tossed the money to the floor. Meanwhile, the girl asked another hostage to remove his belt to tie the villain's hands. At the same time, the young man sat on the floor, pretending to accept his fate. Clearly, our hero had devised a new plan and was waiting for the right moment to strike. With one precise move, he stopped the man attempting to tie him up. In an instant, Linmu spun around, using the hostage as a human shield. He managed to knock the man over, causing the policewoman to lose her balance. Without hesitation, the skilled fighter rushed to the girl and snatched the gun from her hands. He emphasized that the hostage didn't need to act this way and instructed her to return to the corner and stay still. The officer, realizing she had no choice, complied with Linmu's command, though he only muttered grudgingly in response. The protagonist recognized that he had resolved the issue and headed for the exit, clutching 2 bags of money. Before leaving the enemy base, he decided to shed the guard's uniform. Meanwhile, the guard's lifeless body remained at the entrance of the vast basement. A satisfied grin spread across the young man's face, as he had successfully completed his first mission. He chose to scour the base's territory to find a suitable hiding spot for the bags. Linmu didn't hesitate to toss them into a well, which seemed an ideal storage place. He planned to retrieve the money after the operation concluded. Afterward, he contacted Tang Bei to report suspicious findings at the base. Soon, the dragon protectors arrived, methodically evacuating the hostages from the bandit stronghold. Among the victims was the policewoman who had tried to arrest Linmu for theft, unaware that he stood nearby. The young man informed his partner that he would head to headquarters to report the hostages' rescue and proceed with the next phase of the plan. Tang Bei was relieved that all the hostages were safe, and the rescue operation went smoothly. For a moment, she watched the transport carrying the rescued people, reflecting on recent events. She noted that the mission wasn't over, as the hostages mentioned something suspicious inside the base. The protagonist grew wary and asked what they were referring to. It turned out they had reported that 2 mercenaries had fought, but by the time the dragon protectors arrived, both were already incapacitated. The main issue was that the bandit money was nowhere to be found. It was clear that whoever defeated the mercenaries was an expert, as their opponents stood no chance. Tang Bei was about to report to her superiors about a master of such skill among the bandits. Linmu, knowing the truth, merely smiled and agreed that a true expert had been there. After the search, our heroes returned to the Dragon Protector's base to report the mission's results. The young man mentioned he had personal matters to attend to and bid farewell to Tang Bei. He quickly left the base and hailed a cab. Linmu hopped into the back seat and asked the driver to take him to Pingjiang District. Upon arriving, he handed the driver some cash and asked him to wait while he picked up some clothes. The driver agreed, allowing Linmu to handle his business undisturbed. The driver lit a cigarette to pass the time. Minutes later, the young man returned and asked to open the trunk to store his items. The driver, unsuspecting, pressed the button to comply. Linmu swiftly placed 2 heavy bags of money inside. The driver, cigarette in mouth, remarked that the young man seemed pleased after picking up his clothes. Linmu chuckled but thought to himself that anyone would be thrilled with 10 million. Meanwhile, Mr. Wang received a report from his medical checkup after being poisoned by an unknown pill. A subordinate handed him an envelope, stating that the results showed no poison. The doctor confirmed he was perfectly healthy, with no issues, though there was one minor detail. Mr. Wang, uninterested in further discussion, demanded to be left alone. He couldn't contain his fury, suspecting Linmu had tricked him. At that moment, his thoughts were interrupted by a ringing phone. His eyes darted to the screen, displaying a call from an unknown number. Mr. Wang answered sharply, demanding to know who dared disturb him at such a moment. The voice belonged to none other than Linmu, who had reserved a spot at Wang Zhang's restaurant, hoping to have a brief chat with his new acquaintance. Mr. Wang, intrigued, agreed to arrive in a few minutes. Wang Dong tensed, unable to guess what Linmu wanted. The protagonist noted that the old man arrived quickly, to which Mr. Wang replied he didn't want to keep him waiting. Excited but uncertain, Mr. Wang promised to fulfill any request. Linmu laughed softly, looked away, and said nothing of the sort had occurred. He began by stating that Wang Dong should already know about the Lin family situation. Pouring a glass of wine, the protagonist hinted that there was something only Mr. Wang could do for him. The old man, suddenly energized, asked for clarification. Linmu explained that he had some cash but couldn't use it directly. Knowing Mr. Wang was a businessman, he saw him as a valuable ally if the proposal was framed correctly. Mr. Wang quickly grasped the hint, noting that while he lacked many skills, business was his strength. He asked how much money Linmu had. The protagonist confidently revealed he had 20 million and expected Mr. Wang to turn it into a larger sum. The man saw no issue and asked Linmu to relax and trust him. Raising his glass, Limu noted he'd need to visit his comrade beforehand. Wang Dong grabbed his glass, happily agreeing there'd be no problem. After the meeting, our hero headed to the hostel, his regular lodging. Sitting at his laptop while his roommates prepared for university. He realized too many prying eyes made cultivation difficult, so he decided to look for a rental. Browsing apartment websites, Linmu found a promising option. He soon arrived at the location, noting the pleasant surroundings. Stopping at the door, he hoped the owner would be kind. Setting aside his excitement, he rang the bell. A voice from inside asked him to wait. A young boy appeared, asking who Linmu was looking for. Surprised, the protagonist explained he saw online that the house was for rent. The boy understood and asked about the monthly fee. The owner suggested discussing details inside after a tour. Linmu agreed, slipped on guest slippers, and followed. Only then did they introduce themselves. The owner, Mongwin, warned that two others lived upstairs, leaving only one vacant room. He showed the space, priced at 1,200 a month, payable yearly. Limu found the cost high for a small room. Mongwin hinted at cheaper nearby options. A voice outside remarked about another visitor, though Mongwin didn't need the money. It was Song Ling Ro, a university teacher, who recognized her student. Mongwin was surprised, guessing they knew each other. Song Ling Ro confirmed with a smile that Linmu was her student. Limu hesitated, realizing it might be tricky living near Miss Song. He declined, citing the high price, and planned to look elsewhere, not apologizing for wasting time. Song Ling Ro was surprised that someone from the wealthy Lin family couldn't afford rent, suspecting family issues. Ultimately, Limu found a new home, though the Western style wasn't his preference. He chose it for practicality, as its quiet setting was ideal for cultivation. Inspecting the place, he noted a decent kitchen. Realizing he hadn't cooked in a while, he saw it as a good opportunity. Within minutes, he was preparing an appetizing dinner, its aroma filling the room. He thought his skills were decent but the ingredients lacking, so he decided to order better products online. Pulling out his phone, he stumbled upon items more intriguing than condiments. Limu was astonished to find spiritual ginseng online. Certain it was perfect, he purchased it without hesitation. The seller was in Nangu, but distance didn't matter for such a rare, high-quality item. He used an airline to reach the seller, excited about his first flight. Checking his pocket, he confirmed his seat via an electronic ticket on his phone. Pleased to have the company's support, with the plane and arrangements ready, he boarded. Luo Bingyun, from Hayu Corp, was already seated. As passengers settled, creating a low buzz, she was surprised to see an unexpected passenger. She thought the plane was reserved for her company, but an employee explained the airline needed one seat for a VIP. Luo Bingyun didn't object. Linmu, acting friendly, greeted others with a smile, and sat in the reserved seat, exploring the touchscreen. Luo Bingyun silently observed his behavior. Her coworker offered to address the airline, but she dismissed it, finding something intriguing about our hero compared to other VIPs. The plane soon landed successfully. Linmu disembarked first to handle his business. Luo Bingyun was slightly offended that he left without speaking. An employee began to advise her, but she cut him off, saying such situations weren't new. At the auction, the presenter described the rare plant, verified by a botanist, with a starting price of 15,000. Linmu found the amount amusing, believing they undervalued the ginseng. Bidders quickly raised the price to 22,000. Unfazed, Linmu bid 44,000 to secure it. The excited presenter asked for higher bids, counted down, and struck the gavel, declaring the plant sold to our hero. Satisfied, Linmu collected his purchase and left, hoping the bronze cauldron would be ready upon his return. Meanwhile, Luo Bingyun attended a dinner party with elites. She handed her assistant, Ms. Li, a glass of wine to hold, surprising her as the banquet wasn't over. Luo Bingyun explained she needed fresh air and left the rest to Ms. Li. Settling into her car, she rejoiced in her brief freedom, though aware it was an illusion due to her bodyguards. Feeling 5 special forces were excessive, she devised a plan, grinning slyly. She floored the gas pedal to lose them. The bodyguards quickly pursued, but she stopped at a red light. Ignoring traffic rules, she made a sharp right turn. One guard wanted to continue, but his colleague couldn't run the light. Seeing her plan succeed in the rearview mirror, Luo Bingyun laughed wickedly. Wondering what to do next, she planned to reassure her bodyguards. Distracted by her excitement, she didn't notice a figure dart in front of her car. She braked just in time as a bullet flashed before her, temporarily blinding her. The bullet pierced her car window, scattering glass shards. Shocked, Luo Bingyun realized it grazed her face. Had she not stopped, the outcome could have been worse. Certain she was targeted, she sought a safe hiding spot until her bodyguards arrived. She sped into a narrow alley, her footsteps echoing off the walls. Hoping it was safe, she heard someone approaching calmly, assuming it was a passerby. It was Linmu, whom she instantly recognized. Grabbing his hand, she pleaded for him to wait, seeing him as her only hope. Surprised, he asked what she wanted. Flustered, she struggled to explain. Linmu jokingly hinted he didn't need a woman of easy virtue. Outraged, Luo Bingyun felt a wave of shame at the misunderstanding. As he started to leave, she shouted for him to wait. Raising his eyebrows, he questioned her. Embarrassed, she explained she was being hunted by assassins and needed help. Understanding, Linmu agreed to escort her to the police station for safety. They soon reached it, and he urged her to hurry inside for protection. She followed silently, ignoring his suggestion. Annoyed by her persistence, he glared and asked what was wrong. Luo Bingyun couldn't believe he didn't recognize her from the plane. Linmu saw no issue, as he didn't recall her, and prepared to leave, citing other commitments. Shocked, she suspected he was dodging her, believing the attack was too suspicious to report to police. She decided to involve her family instead. Unwilling to let him go, she pretended to be hungry and hinted at needing help, lacking money. Surprised by her persistence, Linmu stopped, urging her to go home or to the police, as it was unsafe to wander at night. He headed to his nearby rented house. Luo Bingyun, mistaking it for a restaurant, followed. Smiling, he clarified he'd take her to his home and make a snack. Convinced he wasn't malicious, she felt the situation was unusual but followed, having nowhere else to go. Inside, she admired his tasteful decor. Linmu seated her, but she felt awkward. Noticing her swollen feet, which she hadn't mentioned, he insisted she wait while he found a solution. Surprised, she watched as he brought a basin of warm water to soothe her feet. Feeling uneasy but grateful, she soaked her feet and introduced herself as Luo Bingyun. He responded briefly, saying his name was Linmu, and asked her to rest while he prepared dinner. Luo Bingyun appreciated being treated as an ordinary person and found his ignorance and care endearing. Noticing her hungry stare at the food, Linmu assumed she was starving. She tried to justify herself, but he simply asked her to wear slippers and join him at the table. He explained he cooked the first thing that came to mind, hoping she'd enjoy it. Delighted by the appetizing spread, she anticipated a tasty meal. Linmu, pleased by her compliments, encouraged her to eat heartily. Seizing the relaxed moment, Luo Bingyun asked if he truly didn't remember her. Sighing, he admitted he couldn't recall where they met. She hinted it was on a plane in Manga City. The image of a female passenger flashed in his mind, and she teased him for being forgetful. He didn't mind and asked why she was being stalked. She suspected work conflicts but was accustomed to such malice. Satisfied with this, Linmu stopped questioning and urged her to finish eating so they could treat her leg. Luo Bingyun ended the conversation and continued her meal. After dinner, they examined her leg. Linmu warned it might hurt, as a large bruise had formed. Embarrassed by the intimacy, she endured as he treated her sprain, which posed no serious threat but could affect her walking if untreated. Surprisingly, she felt no pain, mistaking him for a professional doctor. Impressed despite his student status, she asked to use his bathroom, unable to return home in her state. He agreed, fetching clean clothes. Noting he lived alone and lacked women's attire. Grateful for his hospitality, she thanked him. He left slippers by the bathroom door to prevent slipping. After ensuring her needs were met, Linmu attended to his own affairs. Sitting on the couch, he contemplated the spiritual ginseng from the auction, pondering how to use it. A persistent knock interrupted him. It was Luo Bingyun, fresh from her shower and wearing his clothes, which suited her surprisingly well. Embarrassed, she asked about the table's contents. He explained it was a medicinal herb for a remedy. Surprised, she wondered why a healthy young man needed it. Limu claimed a lifelong weak body requiring medicines. She offered to connect him with good doctors. But he declined, saying Chinese medicine would worsen it, and Western doctors wouldn't help. Noticing the late hour, he suggested she stay, as it was unsafe to travel alone. She agreed, heading to the guest room and advising him to rest. He quietly wished her good night. The next morning, both rose early. Limu prepared to leave but noticed 2 pairs of slippers by the door, puzzled that Luo Bingyun left so early. A pleasant aroma drew him to the kitchen, where he found a freshly cooked breakfast, no cheap feat. A note under a plate revealed Luo Bingyun's number and thanks for his help, explaining her early departure for business. Sitting down, he savored the delicious meal, unaware of her cooking talent. After finishing, he began preparing medicine. Retrieving a special cauldron, he boiled water, added the ginseng root, and completed the recipe. The mixture solidified, and he formed small medicinal pills, though his qi was too weak for easier methods. Satisfied with the quantity, he tested a pill, feeling subtle bodily changes. Though the effect was weak, the pills compensated. He realized that despite this world's low qi, his wealth could propel him to the top. The next day, he attended university as usual. Tang Bei, sitting beside him, noticed he was on his phone and asked what he was doing. He was checking his recent exam grades. Impressed, she noted his improved scores post-hospitalization, joking about falling from a balcony herself. He advised against it for mere grades. A classmate remarked on Linmu's luck, annoying Dutch Xiao Yui, who asked her friends to ignore it. Her friend reminded her that Linmu was still her fiancé on paper, suggesting they address his closeness with Tang Bei. Dutch Xiao Yui, feigning indifference, said she wouldn't fuss over him, as their engagement would soon end. A luxurious sports car pulled up, driven by Luo Bingyun, seeking Linmu. Classmates informed him, and he greeted her, surprised. She laughed, noting he hadn't expected her here. He asked how she knew his university. She explained a call tipped her off, sparing her the search. Embarrassed, he apologized for being busy, though had simply forgotten her. She teased that he didn't seem busy chatting with his girlfriend. Unfazed, he clarified they were discussing class. Luo Bingyun invited him to a dinner shed pay for. But he declined, citing his grandfather's 80th birthday. She guessed there'd be a party and insisted on joining. He warned that his eccentric family might not suit her. But she was confident she could handle it. Realizing resistance was futile, he said he had one more class, after which they could go together. Luo Bingyun agreed to wait and asked him to message her when free. Looking around, Linmu thought no one noticed. But classmates were already gossiping about his beautiful companion. To avoid questions, he rushed to a vending machine for a snack. Relieved to escape, Tang Bei appeared, upset he left without a word. He explained had only met Luo Bingyun twice, once on a plane without speaking, and once saving her from attackers near his home. Skeptical, Tang Bei found it odd that Luo Bingyun sought him out after 2 meetings, joking about a marriage proposal. Limu dismissed it, citing her prominent family. Tang Bei insisted there was no other reason for her friendliness. Confused by her concern, he assured her he wasn't easily fooled and suggested returning to class. Annoyed, she felt he dodged her questions. Classmates continued discussing the incident, with Dutch Xiao Yui's friend outraged that Luo Bingyun invited herself to Linmu's grandfather's party. Dutch Xiao Yui remained calm, claiming no connection to him, as their engagement was nearly over. Her friends saw it as an insult, but Dutch Xiao Yui asked them to relax, as the teacher was coming. After class, students left to unwind. A car horn sound at it was Luo Bingyun, waiting to pick Linmu up. She asked him to drive, as she didn't know the way. He agreed, and they switched places. As he accelerated, Luo Bingyun leaned over, rubbing her previously sprained leg. Noticing, Linmu asked about the bruise. She said it was just sore from heels. He suggested practical shoes, but she refused, prioritizing style for this special occasion. Unfamiliar with such choices, he didn't respond. They soon arrived at the 7-Lin mansion, where relatives gathered for the celebration. The butler, overjoyed to see young Master Mu, greeted him. Linmu returned a brief hello but didn't immediately explain his companion. Uncle Chung inquired about the girl. Linmu introduced her as his friend Luo Bingyun, invited to the birthday party. The butler welcomed her hospitably. Linmu hesitated to enter, recalling his last visit when he fell from the balcony for unknown reasons, leading to his hospital stay and mysterious bodily changes. Luo Bingyun noticed his odd behavior and asked what was wrong. He smiled, assuring her everything was fine, and suggested they hurry inside. They were greeted by a lively crowd chatting casually. Luo Bingyun confidently noted the mansion's grandeur. Other family members noticed Linmu wasn't alone but couldn't place his companion. Some guests realized she was from the Luo family, owners of Hao Corporation. A man tensed, unable to fathom how his nephew knew such a figure. It turned out that Du Xiaoyu, the young lady of the Du family, was also here. She was quite surprised when she realized that her fiancé was with Luo Yun. The family members who had been so eager to get rid of the male protagonist instantly tensed up when they found out about his connection with the Luo family. They began to suspect that all their hard work might now go down the drain because of the interference of such powerful people. The first to decide to speak was the aunt, who pretended that she was genuinely glad to see her nephew. She wondered why on earth the guy had walked into their party so late. Linmu briefly explained that he had a class, after which he had rushed here as fast as he could. After the guy's explanation, the woman went straight to greeting the Luo family representative, because she had never thought that the young lady would personally come to their father's 80th birthday party. Luo Yun was a bit embarrassed by this unexpected politeness, and explained that she hadn't come here as a representative of Haoyu Corp, but rather as a friend of Linmu's. The aunt, with a warm smile, explained that regardless of the reason, their family was simply delighted by the girl's visit. The protagonist interrupted their amiable conversations and wondered where his grandpa was, because he still hadn't seen him. The woman suspected that after the incident, he had forgotten that his grandfather had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, so the head of the family was no longer able to attend such events. Nevertheless, the guy was still determined to talk to his grandfather, so he left all his relatives and guests, and Luo Yun followed him. One of the brothers inquired if their sister had managed to find out anything from the daughter of the owner of Haoyu Corporation. The aunt thought that this Luo family girl was definitely not that simple, so it was currently impossible to find anything related to her. The man then inquired as to what this girl had in common with their nephew, but the sister was clueless, though she was definitely sure that they were not dating. Meanwhile, the protagonist had already entered his grandfather's room and softly announced that he had come home. The head of the family was already too weak, so he needed servants even just to eat. Grandpa's gaze was rather blank, so he just mechanically opened his mouth to be fed. Suddenly, he twitched and grabbed the servant's hand as if he didn't want to eat anymore. Only then did the subordinate see that young Master Linmu had entered the room, causing her to be a bit confused. The boy calmly released the servant and explained that he just wanted to talk to his grandfather. The worker understood everything perfectly well, so she quickly headed towards the exit. Linmu squatted down in front of his grandfather and immediately wished him a happy birthday, taking the old man's hands. Our hero asked if he remembered his grandson, hoping to rekindle at least a spark of memory in his eyes through sheer will. Grandpa still seemed to remember that his favorite grandchild, Linmu, was standing in front of him. At this point in the conversation, Luo Yun intervened and, smilingly, wished Mr. Lin a long life, remarking that he would definitely last longer than the South China Mountains. The main character revealed that it was a friend he had brought to help celebrate his birthday. Grandpa still seemed to be hovering in the clouds, so he didn't say many words and only occasionally nodded back. Smiling, he sharply grabbed his grandson's hand again, but he also remained silent. Linmu understood perfectly well what the situation was, so he just continued to watch the old man. At this moment, a servant came into the room and informed the young master that the celebration was about to start and Du Xiaoyu was waiting for him to come down. Our hero was rather surprised when he heard that name, so he hurriedly went to see what was going on and left his grandfather to the worker. He quickly went out into the hall where his so-called bride was waiting for him, who did not seem pleased with his absence. Linmu finally found a moment to directly ask the girl what she was doing here. It turns out that Du Xiaoyu's grandfather had asked her to attend the event and present a gift from them. She summoned her assistant, who held up a vase that looked very expensive and briefly introduced the gift from the Du family. It was an authentic flower-painted vase from the period of Chinese Emperor Yongzheng. All the guests immediately noticed this rare treasure and began to marvel that Old Man Du was indeed an incredible person, because a gift like this was worth at least several tens of millions. Our hero thanked their family for such a generous gesture but refused to accept the vase, because it was too expensive for their family. Du Xiaoyu irritably reminded him that she was still the young man's fiancée, so it was normal for her to give such gifts. The guy thought that Miss Du had also fallen off the balcony, because she now started talking about the engagement in complete seriousness. The girl once again emphasized that the engagement was planned by the heads of their families, so it has not yet been officially dissolved. Now the protagonist realized that he had made a serious mistake. He understood that if only he had broken off the engagement earlier, then Miss Du could have taken it easy and not come to the party. The guests were visibly shocked by such news and immediately started discussing who could have broken off the engagement, suspecting that it was definitely not Old Man Lin who had Alzheimer's. Then the aunt intervened in this conversation and inquired what was going on here and why the young man wanted to dissolve this union. Our hero explained without any nerves that Miss Du thinks he's too bad for her, which is why she's asked him many times to break off the engagement. Of course, Du Xiaoyu's grandfather didn't want to talk about it either, but that wasn't a problem, because Lin Mu was going to personally talk to him. The girl was quite tense, but replied that it would be as her fiancé wished. At the same time, Luo Yun announced that she had also prepared a gift for his grandfather, hoping that he would like it. The protagonist immediately said that the girl definitely shouldn't have spent any money on it. He carefully picked up the mysterious box, which gave no hint of what was inside. The guests were eagerly watching the young man, because they were eager to see the reaction to what she had prepared for the birthday boy. In the end, Lin Mu still opened the wooden box and saw a ring in front of him that was made of a green gemstone. The guys I was trained on this sort of thing, so he immediately recognized it for what it was. The girl still decided to explain on her own and revealed that it was a ring made from the best jade, called Shuiyang. Du Xiaoyu noted that the stone was pretty good, but in any case, they couldn't be sure that the ring was real. Luo Yun realized that Du Xiaoyu had a keen eye that could determine the quality of the jade so easily. The girl still thought that the ring must be real, because it was unlikely that anyone would dare to deceive the Luo family. Du Xiaoyu decided to finally leave her rival alone and congratulated Grandpa Lin on such an incredible gift. The protagonist, despite the tense situation, smiled and thanked the guests for being so generous. He eventually accepted the gift from Du's family on behalf of his grandfather, but warned that next time he would come to discuss breaking off the engagement, and she shouldn't waste any more time on such events. Du Xiaoyu was clearly irritated by the situation, her lips tightly pressed together, and she only nodded briefly in response, showing that she had no intention of continuing this conversation. The aunt finally intervened, who couldn't understand how her nephew could make such decisions on his own. The guy explained that nothing would work out between them even if you do it through force, so it was easier to break the engagement to avoid wasting their nerves and time. Aunt Rong realized that the protagonist was serious, so she backed off and didn't bother to change his mind. After the party, Lin Mu was back in his acquaintance's car and had already driven away from his family's house. The girl decided to talk about how this Du Xiaoyu is quite beautiful, so the guy should think about whether he will regret breaking the engagement. The protagonist didn't see this as a problem because his fiancée doesn't want to waste time on him, so her beauty and intelligence no longer matter. Luo Yun still suggested that he stay with the girl longer to find out her feelings, and maybe then his feelings wouldn't change. But in any case, Lin Mu wasn't burning with the desire to marry her specifically, so he refused. Also, the lad, glancing at his companion, added that he was not the kind of man who would pursue something that did not belong to him, leaving behind what was at his fingertips. The girl laughed and noted that Lin Mu had a boneless tongue since he spoke of such things so easily. It wasn't long before she informed young Master Lin Mu that they had arrived at the right place. Our hero quickly jumped out of the car and started actively typing something into his phone. The next second, there was a ringing notification sound from Luo Yun's phone. Lin Mu handed her his phone number and asked her to call if the girl needed help again. Luo Yun said goodbye to the protagonist with a smile on her face, showing with all her appearance how much she appreciated this meeting and how happy she was about the circumstances. She then quickly drove off in the direction of her home, so the young man didn't even have time to respond. Linmu was in no hurry to go inside and began to actively dig through the pocket of his jacket. It turns out his grandfather had handed him a note, telling him not to worry about him because the old man was only pretending to have Alzheimer's, so he wouldn't have to mess around with all the family members fighting over the inheritance. The protagonist did not expect that the head of their family had come up with such a cunning plan for himself. The next day, the guy immediately went to the Du family's resort to solve his main problem. He was met at the entrance to the resort by two guards who were in no particular hurry to let the stranger into their master's territory. The guy explained that he was from the Lin family, asking to be let through so he could talk to Grandpa Du. The guard immediately informed his other colleagues that the young man was alone. Eventually, they allowed our hero to pass and informed him that an elderly master was already waiting for him inside. Smiling, Linmu thanked the guards for the opportunity to talk to their elder. He quickly walked up the steps that led to the Du family's huge resort. There were already quite a few people resting by the pool. Among them was Grandpa Du himself, whom the guy was looking for. The old man, who was lounging on a chaise longue and sunbathing, said hello to the protagonist and wondered why he was looking for him. Linmu was going to state everything briefly, so he immediately asked if the master was close to his granddaughter, Du Xiaoyu. Grandpa immediately tensed up because he thought something had happened to the girl. The young man tried to calm him down, explaining that nothing much was going on and told him directly that she just wasn't very happy with the engagement. Mr. Du accounted that it was quite normal for children to quarrel, so he asked Linmu not to take it all seriously. The protagonist still thought that they were simple people, so if Du Xiaoyu didn't want it, he wasn't going to waste her time anymore. One of the Du family members was displeased with the kid's audacity, since he decided to make such a cocky decision on his own. Grandpa immediately intervened in this conflict and ordered the man to shut up and not speak to Linmu in such a tone. All the guests on the resort immediately fell silent because they did not expect the head of the family to be so tough. In the end, the old man once again questioned whether the boy had really come here specifically to break off the engagement. The protagonist confidently confirmed his intentions and emphasized that after this, he and Du Xiaoyu would become mere strangers. Mr. Du, realizing the futility of further resistance, sighed heavily and finally agreed to dissolve the alliance. The guy thanked him for the opportunity and promised to take all the blame. So he was about to leave so as not to take up any more of the old man's time. He quickly turned around and dryly said goodbye to the entire Du family, who definitely didn't expect this turn of events. No one could understand why the master had let this breakup happen so quietly, and they were afraid that rumors about it would spread quickly. Mr. Du was unhappy that someone was trying to oppose his decision because it definitely didn't concern the ordinary family members, and besides, he would know about all their dealings with the Luo family. The man believed that the Luo family was much stronger than the Lin family, so if Xiaoyu married any of them, it would help their family quite a bit. Mr. Du himself also understood all of this, so when the engagement had already been broken off, there was no point in hiding anything. Meanwhile, the protagonist went downtown. After meeting his former father-in-law in the middle of a busy street, Linmu was lucky enough to meet his teacher, Miss Song. The young man was happy about this coincidence, so he decided to help the teacher carry her bags. The girl rejoiced at this sudden good fortune and was not averse to handing over the burden to her apprentice. Linmu immediately noticed that she was carrying some sort of gift, so he decided to inquire about who was having a birthday. It turned out that Song Liangru herself was having the celebration, so the protagonist thought she was going to celebrate alone. The teacher dismissed his speculation because she wanted to get together with her neighbors, so she invited our hero to the celebration as well. The young man didn't seem to have expected such a suggestion from Miss Song at all, so he was confused and didn't know how to answer. Suddenly, Li Guangyu, who was accompanied by his bodyguards, intervened in their conversation. He couldn't understand how Song Liangru could be so bored on her birthday, so he suggested that she throw a real celebration. The girl calmly replied that there was no need for that because she had already found herself some people to celebrate the day with. Li Guangyu suspected she was talking about her friend Xiao Jie, so he offered to take her along and added that birthdays are very important in Korea. Song Liangru wasn't going to fall for his silly tricks because she was Chinese and she wasn't interested in Korean traditions. At that moment, she turned around and saw that one of the guards had already blocked her way. The girl tensed up when she saw such maneuvers and asked Li Guangyu what it all meant. Her acquaintance only grinned enigmatically, leaving this agitated question unanswered. He had been searching for Song Liangru for a very long time and had put a lot of effort into it, so now he couldn't understand why she wouldn't give him any chance. It was hard for the guy to believe that she was going to choose some weakling over him. The protagonist was outraged that he was also involved in this fight even though it didn't concern him in any way. And Song Liangru herself said that compared to Lin Mu, Li Guangyu was just trash. The cocky suitor wasn't going to give up anyway, because the only reason he was putting up with all this was because he liked the girl. He asked our hero not to dream of any relationship because it's as if Song Liangru will just dump him as soon as she no longer needs him. The girl was unhappy that her acquaintance was behaving so inappropriately and asked him to stop slandering her. The guy didn't see any problem at all with her words because he was sure that she would definitely ditch Lin Mu sooner or later. Song Liangru asked her acquaintance to leave amicably, because otherwise she wouldn't let him get away with such a prank. Li Guangyu stood with an arrogant grin because he was sure that the girl definitely couldn't beat him. The girl could not stand it and tried to hit her acquaintance, but he managed to dodge in time. The young man liked that kind of fervor, so he suggested that the beauty try again so he could give her a couple of tips. Now the main character realized that it's not so easy to be a good guy, because he just helped to carry things and in the end he already got into some trouble. One of the bodyguards decided that they didn't need to waste any more time on some weakling and attacked Lin Mu. The protagonist expected such a development, so he carefully watched the movements of his opponent. Eventually, the guy managed to react in time, so he successfully punched his opponent right in the face. Even such an experienced fighter could not resist the strength of our hero, so he fell to the floor without strength. His comrade flew after him as well, whom Lin Mu also neutralized with one precise strike. In the end, the young man remained unharmed, while all his opponents were lying helplessly on the ground. Song Liangru didn't expect to see such a turn of events, so she fearfully asked if our hero was fine. The protagonist began to tell with a smile that he saw the two men surround him, but after blinking once, he had already witnessed these fighters lying on the ground. The guy lied that he must have been rescued by some master, but Miss Song had a hard time believing it because she didn't see anyone nearby. In any case, she was happy for Lin Mu being fine, so any details didn't bother her. At this moment, the bald bodyguard tried to stand up and report that the person who beat them up was definitely the young man himself. Our hero did not want to reveal his skills, so with all his might, he stepped on the hand of the defeated opponent so that he did not say too much. Meanwhile, Song Liangru asked the guy to hurry up and leave this place because her mood had gotten really bad because of all these people. In turn, Li Guangyu wasn't going to let them go so easily, because Lin Mu dared to injure his men. The girl was sure that his bodyguards were injured through no fault of their own, so she suggested that her acquaintance look for the master who had done all this to them. The guy despised professionals because they only knew how to hide like rats, and wanted to see if he could find someone to save them again. The protagonist felt that the situation was starting to heat up, so he tensely looked at Li Guangyu, who was in no way able to keep up with them. Song Liangru sensed this tension and immediately stopped her disciple, because his potential opponent was too dangerous, as he had already won many taekwondo competitions and was quite strong. Meanwhile, Li Guangyu kept trying to hurt our hero, calling him a lowlife who can only hide behind his skirt. The protagonist couldn't afford to stand on the sidelines, because that way he would lose his dignity, so he was going to play a little game with his opponent. He turned to Li Guangyu with confidence in his voice and offered to see what he was capable of. The guy himself was glad that Lin Mu had the courage to accept such a challenge. Lin Mu wanted to get this whole conflict over with quickly and see if his opponent's words matched his real abilities. Li Guangyu didn't wait any longer and accelerated sharply to suddenly attack our hero. He felt that now the protagonist should just beg for mercy, because Lin Mu simply wouldn't be able to resist his incredible strength. Song Liangru realized that there was no way she could help her student, so she remained standing back and simply asked him to be careful. The guy could already see that his opponent was not at all like some other weakling. In any case, the protagonist thought that Li Guangyu was hoping in vain if he really thought that this fight would be so easy. But the guy was still absolutely confident in his strength, so he continued to attack Lin Mu, who had managed to dodge so far. Eventually, the protagonist managed to block even a strong leg kick and, incredibly, kept his balance. An interested smirk immediately appeared on Li Guangyu's face, because he simply hadn't expected the young man to even be able to block his turning kick. He paused for a while and wondered aloud what the protagonist was going to do now, as he was definitely not in a particularly favorable situation. Song Liang-ru could clearly see how strong that blow was, so now she wasn't entirely sure if her disciple was fine. Li Guangyu himself was surprised by this outcome, because he could have calmly broken a board with his punches, yet the protagonist somehow managed to withstand it. Meanwhile, Lin Mu replied that he was indeed fine, though he admitted he hadn't even expected his opponent to be this good. The teacher noticed that the young man was holding up quite well, so she asked him when he had managed to become so strong. He simply told her that it was after he was discharged when he truly realized his weakness. Li Guangyu decided to take advantage of the guy being distracted by the conversation and tried to attack him a second time. It seems that the protagonist had long been prepared for this turn of events, so he put his two hands forward. His opponent immediately noticed this maneuver on his part and thought the guy would try to grab his leg. He simply couldn't let Lin Mu do something like this, so a solution to the problem had to be found right here and now. The guy, mid-flight, changed his attacking foot, trying to attack the protagonist from the side, giving him no time to defend. Song Liang-ru was not too scared, as she believed that Lin Mu had finally met his match. However, the guy actually had a very good reaction, so even in such a desperate situation, he managed to dodge. Eventually, he managed to put his plan into action and successfully grabbed his overconfident opponent's leg. Lin Mu was very angry at this guy, so he decided to teach him a lesson for being so impertinent. He twisted Song Liang-ru's foot with all his might, and then heard a rather unpleasant crunch. Feeling this unbearable pain, even such a strong fighter shrilly screamed. Lastly, the protagonist advised Li Guanyu not to try to make moves he couldn't do, because it would only make him look like a complete fool. Those were his last words, after which he walked over to Miss Song, and together they walked away from the humiliated weakling. When they were back on the main street, the teacher admitted that she had not expected this turn of events. She marveled that Lin Mu had gotten so strong in just a few months, and our hero simply said it was all just for his health. Song Liang-ru had been haunted by the feeling that she was talking to a completely different person the entire time, adding that the guy had only gotten better. She immediately remembered that her roommate was also very good at martial arts. The protagonist guessed that Miss Song was talking about Zixi, whom Li Guangyu had mentioned earlier. Then the teacher decided to reveal that her friend has been practicing since she was a child, so she uses the sword as if it were an extension of her arm. The guy realized that she was quite good, so he inquired about what such professionals did, but Song Liang-ru didn't know any details. In the end, she herself suggested that Lin Mu have tea together, because her neighbor was just at home. The protagonist declined because he still had some business to attend to and wished them a good time. The guy said goodbye and was about to leave, but Song Liang-ru lastly told him to make sure to stop by next time. Lin Mu was calmly walking through the streets of the city when he suddenly heard the sounds of a chase behind him. It turns out that some brazen thief had dared to steal a bag in broad daylight and was now desperately trying to escape prosecution. The villain wasn't going to give up so easily, so he yelled for everyone to disperse and give him his way. He tried to quickly run across the road, in the middle of which a police car had just stopped. A female law enforcement officer immediately jumped out of the car and attempted to apprehend the man who was so desperately trying to flee the scene of his crime. The thief tried to jump over the fence, but in the end his foot slipped unsuccessfully. As a result, he fell to the ground and dropped with a clatter the very bag he was so eager to steal. The policewoman immediately jumped over the fence so as not to miss the opportunity to capture the villain. She emphasized in a cold, stern voice that any resistance was futile. The thief unhappily clucked his tongue because he realized he had no more avenue of retreat. Eventually, the man pulled a knife from his pocket and began threatening the girl who tried to restrain him. The police officer ordered him to stop resisting because assaulting an officer is a serious offense. The man thought he wasn't a thief until he was caught, so he could do whatever he wanted, but backup was on the way, so it would be hard for him to evade the police. The officer said that if he did surrender voluntarily, she would pretend that the offender had not assaulted her. The girl wasn't going to give up so easily anyway, so the girl could only dream of such a thing. She realized that the situation with this intruder was too complicated, so he was leaving her no other choice. The policewoman was about to apprehend the bandit, but he started waving his knife at her to stop her from approaching. The girl acted quite professionally, so she quickly grabbed the thief by the arm and immobilized him. As she paused and laid the man on the ground, she emphasized that he had a choice. Before that, she asked why the whole situation was made more complicated, because now the violator had earned himself another non-compliance with the law. Suddenly, someone else put his foot down on the policewoman and emphasized that it was better for the woman to stay out of these matters. The police officer then immediately realized that someone had come to the aid of the bandit. She had pretty good physical fitness, so she managed to dodge in time. Now the policewoman understood that it was this gangster organization that had it all together. One of the men said that there are some things you should just turn a blind eye to, so a girl better not seriously look for trouble on her day off. She, as a police officer, was outraged by this sort of thing, because she couldn't just let criminals go. The bandit was annoyed that the girl was so stubborn, so he decided to deal with her. The policewoman was able to dodge the first blow, and then realized something was wrong. She stumbled helplessly against the fence and realized she had nowhere else to dodge. Meanwhile, the bandit had already pulled out a knife and rushed towards the girl to finish her off sooner. At this point, someone stopped the villain and pointed out that everyone makes mistakes, so you should forgive them if possible. It turned out to be the protagonist, who felt that there was no need to resort to sacrifice during a routine robbery. In the end, the bandit agreed with him and decided to forgive the girl this time, emphasizing that she should stay out of other people's business next time. Linmu was glad that he had solved this problem so easily. Staring at the departing bandits, the guy didn't even notice that the police officer had already handcuffed him. The protagonist couldn't understand at all what it was all about, and the girl explained that he needed to fully realize what he had just done. The guy still didn't see the problem either, because all he wanted to do was help a cop who was in trouble. In turn, the girl absolutely refused to believe that Linmu was not familiar with these criminals. The protagonist was annoyed by this attitude towards him, because he really saw these people for the first time. But she still didn't trust him, because the bandits obeyed him so easily. Linmu still didn't understand anything, because he was sure that the bandits had only left because they wouldn't be able to defeat him in a fight. The policewoman was not at all sure that the young man could defeat 3 robbers, so she was still going to take him to the station and write a report to clear up the whole situation. The guy began to realize that the situation was quite serious, so he got nervous, because he still had a considerable amount of important plans left, which were literally destroyed in a second. At that moment, another police car pulled up beside them, from where another officer got out and immediately recognized Officer Wong. The young man realized that she was the one calling for backup and saw that his colleague had managed to handle the perpetrator herself. Then the girl explained that it wasn't the same robber, but there were suspicions that this particular guy might have been an acquaintance of the bandits. The officer agreed to help her and take the perpetrator to the station himself, and Ms. Wong herself was to return to the office. At this point, the policewoman was a little embarrassed, because she still needed help getting into the car as she had managed to twist her ankle during the confrontation. Putting our hero in the car, the guy quickly rushed to help his co-worker. He immediately noted that the girl was rather clumsy. She tried to explain that things had accidentally gotten out of hand. Suddenly, Ms. Wong froze in place because she saw something shocking. It turned out that Linmu had managed to get out of the handcuffs, so he was no longer in the car. Now the police officers began to doubt that the protagonist was an ordinary man. In turn, the guy himself was thinking that he shouldn't have been prying after all when he heard someone call out to him. The protagonist was greatly surprised because he saw that it was Miss Luo, who should have been home a long time ago. The girl explained that she had forgotten to buy some condiments, so she went out to get them and suggested that Linmu take a walk together and then come over to visit with her friend. In the end, he agreed, because it was the best choice for hiding from the police. Pretty soon, they had already gone to the store and returned home, where Zixi was already waiting for them, surprised that they had managed so easily. One of the girls remarked that Song Liang Ru had found such a cool seasoning and asked what the name of this beautiful young man was. Another friend asked Zixi not to be so persistent, because she might scare away such a handsome man. The main character said hello, and said with a smile that he was glad to have this meeting. The girls couldn't wait any longer, so they asked their friend to introduce them as soon as possible, before she finally introduced Linmu briefly, calling him her disciple. Zixi guessed that this young man was the teacher's favorite, since she had invited him home. Song Liangru then revealed that this guy had helped her teach Li Guangyu a lesson, so she called him over to thank him for such a favor. One of the girls was surprised by this fact, because she still didn't know that Li Guangyu had taken up again. Zixi asked if she could call our hero Amu and said that their acquaintance, although he was a scoundrel, in battle he knew no equal. The protagonist took a seat next to him and noted that his abilities were definitely not comparable to the very girl he had already heard a lot about. Zixi guessed that her friend had already told her about her powers, because otherwise the guy himself hadn't guessed about her powers. She also hinted that an acquaintance of theirs named Mangwan was currently abroad, so they had a spare room in the house. Linmu definitely didn't expect to be asked to move so quickly, but he had already found a place to live, so there was no need for him to do so. The girl still offered to let our hero take the room downstairs and help all the others move things upstairs if needed. Song Liangru agreed with her friends and asked the guy to stay here to live and help each other. Since the girlfriends were so insistent, the protagonist decided to accept their sudden offer. He had been warned right away that the second floor was for girls only, so it was forbidden to enter without permission. Also, the guy should clean up after himself and always wash the dishes if they eat together. Linmu was starting to get tense with so many rules, but Zixi explained that there weren't that many and asked her new neighbor to listen carefully to all the details. Eventually, the girl finished listing all the rules and suggested they finally get to the celebration. Everyone remembered that they had gathered at this place to celebrate Songru's birthday. 2 days later, the guy had already realized that it was pretty difficult with girls, and going shopping already seemed like a hassle. After a while, the protagonist was finally able to pack all the packages into the trunk of his car. At this moment, someone behind his back rejoiced at such an unexpected encounter, so Linmu turned around in surprise. Turns out it was the same policewoman who was already jingling the handcuffs in her hands. The young man noted confusedly that he really hadn't expected to meet the officer at this point. The protagonist found a way to get away from the police officer and pretended that there was something amazing behind her back. The policewoman was very inattentive and fell for such a stupid ploy from Linmu. It turned out that the guy had already disappeared somewhere, so the girl shouted indignantly to the whole street. At the last second, she noticed the protagonist trying to flee the scene on his bike. The policewoman quickly sat down in her squad car and set off in pursuit of Linmu, who was driving quite fast. For her part, Song Liangru couldn't understand where Linmu had disappeared to so suddenly. At that moment, a cute couple was walking down the sidewalk, completely unaware of what was in store for them. A girl was walking with her lover and carelessly telling some life story when someone whizzed by nearby. She couldn't figure out what it was, and then she noticed that her ice cream had gone somewhere. They further witnessed a police car chasing this unknown object at full speed. The guy couldn't understand at all what was going on, because he had never witnessed a bicycle being chased by the police before. Meanwhile, the protagonist was highly annoyed that this female police officer was so stubborn and restless. He also realized that at this rate, the tires on his vehicle wouldn't last long. Linmu realized that he needed to look for alternative ways to retreat and saw an inconspicuous alley nearby that was suitable for this. It turned out that the policewoman was closely following the young man's actions, so she reacted in time and swerved. A smirk immediately appeared on the girl's face because she was sure that the guy would definitely not be able to hide from her. The protagonist did not suspect at all that his plan had failed and calmly walked down the street, rejoicing that he had managed to escape from this mad woman. Within a second, he heard a distinctive click and felt the cold metal of the handcuffs around his wrist. The young man directly admitted that the officer really got to him because she had been chasing him for such a long time. The police officer herself did not see this as a problem because she merely wanted to bring the escaped felon to the station. Our hero was still trying to prove that he hadn't done anything illegal and yelled that there was a robbery going on right behind the officer's back. The girl wasn't going to fall for Linmu's tricks a second time, but he spoke in complete seriousness. She promised that the young man would be a corpse if he fooled her again, but she still believed it because she heard a noise and shouting nearby. The police officer asked the protagonist to wait here while she checked to see what was going on. Obviously, the protagonist was not going to obey the girl, so he immediately tried to get out of the handcuffs. He was about to leave, but heard that the criminal had already taken a hostage. Eventually, the guy got interested in the whole situation because he hadn't yet seen a robber cover himself with hostages. A considerable number of people had already gathered in the shopping center, not knowing what to do in such a situation, and the robber threatened to shoot the defenseless man he managed to grab. As the protagonist got closer, he saw that the robber had captured a policeman, but people in the crowd told him that he used to have a little girl in his hands with whom this brave girl had switched. Lin Mu was surprised because he didn't expect that the officer had such a good heart that she sacrificed herself for the child. The policewoman continued to keep her cool and ordered Lan Zidong to stop because he was already surrounded. The man was not going to give up and ordered everyone to fall back and prepare a car for him, because otherwise his hostage would die. The protagonist began to get annoyed with the whole situation because there was too much noise from this criminal. Suddenly, he just plopped down on the floor right in the middle of the crowd, causing the bandit to immediately look away from voicing his conditions. Lin Mu didn't bother to explain anything and carefully fixed his hair before continuing with his plan. The policewoman was shocked when she saw the guy and asked him to get out of here as soon as possible because it was too dangerous. It turns out that our hero decided to pretend that he had always been a fan of Brother Lan and wanted to give him some sort of gift. At this moment, a woman in the crowd indignantly shouted that Lin Mu had stolen her bag. The young man paid no attention to her and continued to talk about how the bandit was his idol and ever since he was a kid he wanted to be like him. The officer was incredibly angry at the fact that the protagonist was behaving in such a manner, and now she was sure that nothing good could be expected from him. Lin Mu roughly gagged the girl and emphasized that he was now talking to Brother Lan, so she had no right to interfere in the conversation. The man started to get stressed out by our hero's nonsense, so he asked to get him a car and offered to talk when they left the scene. The guy quickly started running errands from the thug and remembered that the policewoman's car was just parked somewhere nearby. Eventually, he took his time going outside and reported that there was a sniper nearby. The criminal was shocked by this information and once again questioned what the protagonist had just said. He finally looked around and saw that the young man had actually lied to him and there were no snipers nearby. Meanwhile, the main character took the opportunity that he had distracted the bandit and threw him his bag. Lan Zidong managed to react to the sudden attack in time and put out his hand, knocking the bag away. He decided to immediately fire his gun, but there was a misfire, so Lin Mu remained unharmed. The guy's reactions were perfect, so he quickly went low and grabbed his opponent's arm. After that, he turned around and gave the bandit a blow to the head from his elbow, so he could no longer stay on his feet. The world around Lan Zidong abruptly spun, and in just a second he was on the ground. Our hero then promptly clobbered the criminal, who now promised to finish him off at the first opportunity. In turn, the policewoman was already too angry, so she declared that she had had enough today and was going to deal with this annoying intruder right here and now. The protagonist turned to her and asked her to give the purse to the lady he had managed to rob because his hands were full for the time being. The girl didn't mind and quickly began to gather up all the things that were scattered around. Lan Zidong, who had already been received by the two police officers, was incredibly angry at being treated in this manner, so he was already thinking of a revenge plan. An hour later, Lin Mu had already returned home to his new roommates, who were completely unaware of what had happened to him. He was met at the doorstep by Song Liang-ru, who immediately asked where the guy had disappeared so suddenly. The protagonist sighed heavily and replied that he just didn't want to talk about it, because he hadn't had much luck lately. The girls still did not calm down, because they were worried about the fate of their friend, while Lin Mu explained that nothing special had happened to him. As he walked further along, the young man noticed that his friends were watching some concert on TV, and they told him that they really wanted to go there, but tickets were very hard to get. At this moment, Zixi noticed that the protagonist had finally returned, wondering if he was going to apologize for his sudden disappearance. Lin Mu was well aware that he had no choice, so he promised to definitely redeem himself. He asked his acquaintances to wait a little while he stepped away to make one important call. The girls were surprised that our hero had just returned and he had some problems again, but the guy promised to tell everything later. Zixi was no longer sure that this young man was an ordinary student because he was acting too mysterious. Song Liang-ru agreed with her friend and noted that he seemed too masculine for his years, but the girl thought that wasn't his only oddity. As it turned out, the guy had already made arrangements for Yao Xinyan's concert and hoped his girlfriends had free time for him in 3 days. Zixi was overjoyed at this news and wondered how he had managed to get tickets. The protagonist didn't give details about old man Wang helping him and briefly explained that he had some connections. The next day, the whole company went to an establishment to grab a bite to eat together. Linmu immediately noticed that this place was suspiciously quiet today. In turn, the friends were surprised that their acquaintance also came to the cafeteria today. The girl immediately felt someone else's gaze on her, so she turned sharply towards the company of friends. Suddenly, the protagonist looked closer and felt that there was chi energy lurking in her chest, which literally shocked him. The guy definitely didn't expect to meet another cultivator in a place like this. Zixi thought that he had such an eye for the girl because of her beauty, and the man confirmed it, adding that aside from all that, the stranger was rather calm. The girl didn't seem to like this description of this mysterious beauty, so she stepped on Lin Mu's foot with all her might. The young man did not expect to feel such a sharp pain at all, so he asked fearfully why he deserved such a punishment. Zixi irritably explained that it was as if our hero's eyes were already starting to pop out and asked him to hurry up and get them something to eat. Lin Mu began to guess that this girl had somehow hurt his friend, but she didn't want to say anything. Song Liang-ru also said that she didn't know anything about the stranger, so our hero was only left to get lost in his speculation. In fact, the teacher thought that the young man had managed to fall in love with her at first sight. Lin Mu then explained that this girl just seemed somehow familiar to him, and there was also some special aura around her. Miss Song was not impressed by all these words at all, so she only sighed unhappily. The protagonist realized that the situation was heating up, so he quickly took out the front row seat tickets for Yao Xinyan's concert tonight from his pocket. The girls quickly grabbed their gift and forgave the young man this time. After all, a smile immediately appeared on Song Liang-ru's face, and she promised to take all her friends to the concert after class. It wasn't long before they arrived at the venue, where a good number of fans had gathered. The girls didn't expect Lin Mu to get such fancy places for them at all. They all admired Yao Xinyan because it felt like there were only more than 1,000 police officers patrolling the concert here. To Zixi, this fact was obvious, because this singer was a real star. Of the entire crowd, only our hero had no idea whose concert they were attending. At that second, the very girl whose exit everyone had been waiting for appeared on the stage. She greeted all her fans with a smile and said that she was very happy to perform here in Dunhai. At the same time, everyone in the audience was actively supporting their idol and shouting their love for her. The girl went on to say that it was only because of her fans that she was here today and wanted to dedicate the first song to everyone who supports her. She asked everyone to enjoy a song called To the Descendants of True Love. 3 hours later, the concert was still going on, so the singer looked pretty tired already, but the next part of the performance promised to be even more fun. Yao Xinyan announced that she wanted to invite someone from the audience to help with the performance. She asked the organizers to point the spotlight at someone she could call on stage. Of course, Zixi began to actively wave her hands to dedicate the spotlight just to their company. She saw that the light was gradually heading in their direction, and she was already glad that this person was turning out to be it. After a second, Yao Xinyan asked for the spotlight to stop because she saw the right person. In the end, it turned out that this lucky guy was the main character, who definitely did not expect this turn of events. The singer happily greeted her audience and invited the happy fan to run to her stage as soon as possible. Zixi couldn't understand at all why her acquaintance was still sitting in his seat and didn't seem to be in a hurry to go on stage at all. Lin Mu himself didn't understand why he had to go anywhere, and then his friend explained that he had become a lucky man and could now sing with Yao Xinyan. The boy was surprised at this news and still didn't want to go anywhere, because he couldn't sing at all. The girl then warned him that he would just set the artiste up if he didn't go. Lin Mu didn't care about this fact at all, but Zixi also didn't insist and said that the decision was up to the young man himself. Meanwhile, Yao Xinyan turned to the guy in white again and asked why he didn't want to sing with her. The main character explained that he was too shy to go on stage and also couldn't sing, so he wanted such a happy opportunity to go to someone else. Fans immediately started shouting that the guy had said everything beautifully and now wanted their own opportunity to sing with Xinyan. The girl decided to get behind Linmu and choose a new viewer for this interactive segment. A second later, the spotlight illuminated another spectator who was delighted that he had been chosen. This guy ran to the stage with all his legs and very soon sang his favorite song and a duet with Yao Xinyan. At the end, they hugged tightly, and the girl thanked her viewer for such strong support. After that, the girl thanked all her fans again, and the hall erupted in wild applause and squeals. That was the end of the concert, so all our heroes left the hall and were happy that everything had gone so cool. At the same time, Zixi was very unhappy that the guy took away her chance to go on stage and make this night finally perfect. Meanwhile, some two guards appeared behind Lin Mu's back and directly addressed him. One of the bodyguards reported that their mistress would like to meet the protagonist. The young man was surprised to hear such a request and wondered who the lady was. The guard didn't hide anything and directly explained that Miss Yao Xinyan had asked for this. Then our hero was even more surprised and wondered the reason for this, but the bodyguards themselves also knew nothing and just followed their mistress's orders. In the end, Lin Mu decided it was time to leave, and he asked his girlfriends to head home without him. Song Liangru gave a soft smile and nodded in consent, but not before playfully asking the guy to please return home in one piece. Zixi, ever the thoughtful friend, added a cheeky request for the young man not to forget about his girlfriends after meeting the famous Yao Xinyan herself. The protagonist, with newfound firmness and confidence in his voice, then asked the guards to take him directly to their mistress. Just 5 minutes later, the guy was already at the right place, and a melodious voice, Yao Xinyan's, called out, "The door to my room is open." The famous singer was just changing her clothes after the concert and was quite surprised that Lin Mu had arrived so quickly. The shocked young man froze on the spot, utterly unprepared to see the superstar in such a state. Eventually, he quickly closed the doors behind him and apologized profusely for walking in at such an inopportune moment. Yao Xinyan, however, simply brushed it off, saying there was no problem with that at all. She explained that she had mistaken our hero for a servant. She quickly got dressed and then, with a graceful gesture, asked Lin Mu, who still hadn't uttered a single word, to please come inside. Still slightly bewildered, the guy immediately asked, "Miss Yao, what did you call me here for?" The girl playfully wondered why he hadn't gone on stage earlier, teasingly assuming he was afraid she would bite him. The protagonist didn't immediately answer her question. Instead, he politely asked the singer to sit a little more modestly, explaining that he simply couldn't have a normal conversation with her in that attire. Yao Xinyan laughed heartily, finding it amusing that the guy looked like a true gentleman, but then, with a glint in her eye, remarked that it turned out he could become a wild beast at any moment. Lin Mu, feeling a bit awkward, apologized again and was about to leave, since it seemed the girl didn't have anything else to say. But the girl was not going to let our hero go so easily. She sprang up from her chair and practically ran after him. The sharp echo of her heels resounded around the room as she moved closer and closer to the young man. It turned out that the singer, in a rather strange act, decided to playfully smack the main character on the cheek. After that, the girl abruptly stepped back, and the stunned Lin Mu, still processing what just happened, asked if she was all right. Yao Xinyan laughed sweetly and explained that the guy just started killing so early, even though she just wanted to chat with him. The confused protagonist, who now had a clear lipstick mark on his cheek, simply couldn't understand what a real celebrity like her could possibly talk about with an ordinary young man like himself. The girl then explained that he was the very first man to ever turn her down, which, in her eyes, made him an incredibly interesting person. Lin Mu, to his credit, actually admitted that she was indeed very attractive, but he firmly emphasized that not every man would fall for it. This highly unusual behavior of the guy greatly hurt Yao Xinyan's self-esteem, especially since she had shown genuine interest in him. The protagonist, feeling a pang of regret, apologized if he had hurt the girl's feelings in any way and expressed regret for all his words. In any case, Lin Mu had no intention of lingering here and quickly headed towards the exit. The girl didn't delay our hero any longer and was glad that she had at least managed to get his name. Meanwhile, the young man quickly went to the restroom to wash off the lipstick residue that could have raised quite a few awkward questions. He realized that there was no way he would have been able to explain what had happened anyway if someone he knew had caught him. The guy wanted to get home as soon as possible because his roommates would surely get angry again due to his prolonged absence, so he decided to call himself a cab. The protagonist calmly left the room and headed towards the exit to meet his driver. At that moment, he heard some suspicious rustling behind his back and immediately felt that someone was following him. The mysterious stranger didn't bother to explain anything and simply asked Linmu to turn around quietly so that everything would go smoothly. The young man was well aware that he'd better not take any chances, so he raised his hands and offered to talk peacefully and not resort to forceful methods. The mercenary immediately said that he usually tells the whole truth to a man who is about to die, but now it was different because he had lost that desire after seeing the face of the protagonist. In just a moment, the fighter had already bared his sharp blades that were cleverly hidden in his palm. Sufficiently accelerated, he threw them towards Linmu, who still continued to stand with his hands raised. The young man himself didn't expect at all that throwing knives would be used against him. At the same time, he didn't panic, because his skills were more than enough to dodge such an attack. Linmu finally managed to catch these knives without any problems, so he coolly asked who had sent this mercenary over. The mysterious stranger immediately picked up on the fact that the guy wasn't that bad, so he decided to back off for now and promised to take his life a little later. The protagonist wasn't about to let him just vanish without even finding out some crucial information. He quickly made the bold decision to use those very same throwing knives, unleashing one crisp, precise throw. In the end, all the blades simply clattered harmlessly to the ground because the mercenary was, impressively, able to react to this sudden attack in time. The stranger, regaining his composure, ordered our hero to keep standing perfectly still, warning that otherwise, he would definitely demonstrate just how confident he was in his own formidable abilities. Linmu was certainly not one to be timid, so he calmly suggested that his opponent come back to him when he was fully confident in his success, rather than making empty threats. The mercenary, a man of silent resolve, simply left without another word. The guy, our hero, then pondered the fact that this mysterious fighter was no weaker than himself, which meant the man who had hired him must have forked out an absolute fortune for such a skilled assassin. In addition to that, the young man noticed, with a keen eye, that this shadowy figure hadn't even put in his full strength, implying it would be incredibly difficult to deal with him alone. Our hero wisely decided not to dwell on this overwhelming thought for too long, because his main goal was, and always would be, to become even stronger, a path which would definitely help him cope with such a problem in the future. For now, he came to the sensible conclusion that he should just head straight home and meet up with his roommates. Linmu mused that he had acted very cautiously before, so now he couldn't quite understand why he had suddenly attracted the attention of these dangerous assassins. Suddenly, the guy felt some unusual sensation, a peculiar pull, as if there was something strange somewhere within the bustling crowd. He instinctively looked around and spotted the same captivating girl he had met in the cafeteria the other day, and instantly realized that this powerful, enigmatic aura was emanating directly from her. In turn, the beauty herself also recognized the protagonist, and a flash of memory allowed her to immediately recall exactly where they had managed to see each other before. At this very moment, she, too, felt some strong, unfamiliar energy flowing powerfully through her body. The girl couldn't understand why her usually frosty chi was so unexpectedly excited and immediately suspected that it had something profound to do with Linmu. The protagonist immediately noticed that there was clearly something amiss with her, so he, with genuine concern, wondered if the stranger was okay, as she didn't look particularly healthy. The guy gently, tentatively, held her back and immediately thought that now was the opportune moment to take a chance and ask the girl about this mysterious chi energy. The beauty herself, however, strongly disliked the fact that Linmu had allowed himself to touch her without permission, so she abruptly yanked his hand away and, with a sharp tone, asked what he wanted. She then abruptly turned around and began to walk away, leaving the young man utterly bewildered, unable to figure out what he had done wrong. The guy also didn't want to let this mysterious stranger go so easily, not when he was so determined to get to the bottom of this intriguing phenomenon. He quickly chased after the girl, who had already managed to run into some narrow alleyway, and tried to explain that he only wanted to ask a few simple questions. The stranger did not stop for a second and, with incredible agility, made several sharp jumps upward to precisely break away from our hero. Linmu was absolutely shocked when he saw such mind-boggling abilities, because he had yet to encounter such a thing in this world. He immediately realized that this mysterious lady was perfectly proficient in the legendary Qigong technique. In just a few breathtaking seconds, the girl had already made a few more effortless leaps between the sheer walls of the buildings and was now somewhere high up on the roof. Lin Mu was utterly mesmerized by her honed, graceful, and almost ethereal movements. The protagonist immediately sped up his own pace, because he realized that he absolutely couldn't afford to fall behind his intriguing goal. Eventually, the guy realized, with a touch of mild frustration, that it was truly unfortunate that he had momentarily missed out on such a nimble girl. It was only now that the guy finally stopped to catch his breath, finding himself in some unfamiliar place. His first clue to his whereabouts was subtly given to him by the gentle, rhythmic ringing of the bells of a magnificent temple that stood nearby. Linmu turned around and saw the huge, ancient shrine directly behind his back, from which this enchanting sound was emanating. He realized there was nothing left to lose, so he moved closer to examine the sacred place. There were quite a number of parishioners already standing devoutly around, praying earnestly for various benefits. At this moment, the guy felt an immense amount of strong qi energy emanating powerfully from within this very temple. He saw that there was an old man sitting serenely in the middle of the shrine, deep in meditation, and he marveled even more at the profound atmosphere of the place. The protagonist instantly felt the distinct Buddhist golden aura that seemed to fill the entire space around him. It was quite hard for the young man to truly believe what was happening, so much so that he even began to doubt his own eyes that were clearly seeing that glowing, divine aura. The first to speak was the old man himself, his voice calm and ancient, who explained that this was indeed the site of a sacred Buddhist temple. The protagonist could not understand at all what had happened, because this man had literally, instantly, appeared right in front of him. The old man, with a knowing smile, noted that the guy had been standing there for an entire hour, which prompted him to decide to ask what he could possibly do to help a visitor to their humble temple. Linmu greeted the great monk in return, bowing low, and explained that he was just a little lost in thought, utterly captivated by the surroundings. At the same time, the guy was thinking about the undeniable fact that this kind old man possessed the aura of a non-mortal being, and was surprised that this was the unique energy that would attract him so strongly. The monk, sensing that our hero had a truly good heart, kindly asked him not to worry and to simply follow him. The young man realized that this was the perfect, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to learn new, profound details, so he didn't resist in the slightest and obediently followed the old man. He decided to ask the monk what this sacred place truly was, and the monk, with a gentle smile, told him that this was where he meditated for Buddhist enlightenment. The protagonist was utterly surprised that he was able to get to a place like this, so everything around him felt like some kind of surreal dream. The guy even managed to see the real, majestic appearance of the legendary Buddha, which was definitely not possible for an ordinary person. Meanwhile, the saint decided to approach Lin Mu and directly told him, with profound solemnity, that the latter had heavy sins lying on his soul, but there was some specific set of techniques that could potentially help in his cultivation journey. Lin Mu was very happy to have this incredible opportunity, so he profusely thanked the Buddha. A second later, a bright, blinding flash appeared in Amitabha's fingers, which seemed to hold his immensely powerful, divine energy. The next moment, that powerful cloud of holy power crashed right into the forehead of the protagonist, a feeling that jolted him to his core. The great monarch himself did not expect at all that the Buddha would decide to bestow his great power on this particular young man. Of course, the old man did not question the wise deeds of the great Buddha Amitabha, so he humbly continued to pray to him. Now, the events are brought a day forward and continue within the very same powerful temple. It turned out that the protagonist had actually fallen asleep right within the hallowed walls of the shrine and was now terrified to wake up from what felt like a strange, yet incredibly vivid, dream. Linmu thought that all these bewildering events had just woken him up, and he was now even more stunned by the reality of it all. At the same time, he felt a fierce, throbbing headache and realized that it definitely arose from the deep cognition and spiritual energy he had just absorbed. Stepping outside, the young man realized, with a jolt, that it was already morning and concluded that he had been in this sacred place all night. The great monarch, the venerable old monk, immediately appeared behind him and greeted his guest warmly. Linmu immediately bowed low, a respectful gesture, and thanked the master for such a generous and unexpected gift. The old man explained that kindness has no limits and sincerely hoped the young man would treasure the profound knowledge he had received from the Buddha. The protagonist, with deep gratitude, recognized that he had learned a lot, and so he promised he would definitely use the skills he had learned. At noon, he was at Dunhai University, where the class in which students were to study derivatives had already begun. The guy himself was very distracted, his mind elsewhere, because he couldn't stop thinking about the fact that the temple he had been to yesterday was renowned for its powerful seals that supposedly ward off bad luck. He also now, with a deeper understanding, agreed that kindness and respect for everyone, it turns out, is not gratuitous. There are karmic returns. However, unfortunately, the technique obtained was still, for the time being, too powerful for the young man, because he simply didn't have enough spiritual chi energy for it yet. At the same time, our hero was absolutely sure that this profound knowledge would still definitely be useful to him in the long run. He had already managed to reach the spirit accumulation stage, and it was much faster than he had ever expected, because it was generally expected to take a year or even more. Thanks to the special chi that the young man had when he was reborn, he didn't have to exert any effort whatsoever to pass the foundation formation realm. Now, after suddenly obtaining this powerful technique, Linmu immediately jumped directly to the spirit accumulation stage, causing everything to progress as perfectly normal. Moving to the spirit gathering stage, a warrior would already become several times stronger than he was at the peak of the foundation formation realm, so the guy was already incredibly excited about the future possibilities. The protagonist was so pleased with his good fortune that he couldn't contain his emotions and chuckled quietly to himself. It was only now that the young man realized that he was actually sitting in a classroom, so he should at least restrain himself a little. The teacher noticed the fact that Linmu was laughing for some reason during his subject, but the guy didn't bother to explain anything and just apologized profusely for his seemingly inappropriate behavior. After class, the guy went outside and, seeking an outlet for his overflowing energy, hit the wall with all his might to blow off some steam. Our hero was inwardly angry with himself because he was now happy about even some small thing, which definitely didn't match the powerful name of the strongest cultivator. At this moment, some strange, familiar feeling, a distinct spiritual resonance, came over Linmu again. The young man immediately guessed that it must have been the same girl from before. Eventually, he started actively looking for her among the bustling crowd and quickly saw a familiar silhouette on the busy street. The protagonist concluded that after reaching the spirit gathering stage, he could now easily sense her presence from such a remarkable distance, and he was absolutely certain that there was definitely something intrinsically wrong or unique with this beauty. The girl herself, however, was clearly unhappy about this unexpected encounter because she thought that Linmu was purposely pursuing her, a notion she found irritating. The guy decided to explain everything peacefully and, to start things off, genuinely get to know the mysterious stranger he was so interested in. Our hero, with a sincere tone, said that for some unknown reason, when he and the girl got close, their chi reacted strangely to each other, and he asked if she herself wanted to find out the true cause of this peculiar phenomenon. The beauty was in no hurry to introduce herself and noted, with a hint of condescension, that the young man was as ignorant as she was about this. But she also realized that it was no good if things continued like this, with their energies reacting so strangely in public. She then asked Linmu to follow her to a quiet, secluded place where they could safely check what was truly causing their chi to react like this. They had to walk through the woods for about half an hour, and then the girl finally reported that they were already there, at the perfect spot. The protagonist stopped as if on cue, and, looking around, asked what they were going to do now, but his enigmatic companion had no immediate ideas either. The guy decided to crouch down on the ground and, with a focused mind, try to deliberately connect their respective chi to see what could come out of it. The beauty herself had no other plans, so she, with a touch of curiosity, agreed to the young man's unusual proposal. She crouched down gracefully next to him and began to meditate, focusing intently on her breath to connect her energy with the main character's aura. Linmu instantly felt their chi interacting much more strongly than expected, a powerful surge of energy. The girl also noted this distinct oddity, because her ice-cold chi was now feeling much purer than usual. In turn, our hero felt that not only her partner's aura was being cleansed and refined, but his own as well, a truly beneficial exchange. At the same time, the guy couldn't quite figure out what unique technique the girl was practicing, because there was something undeniably cool and remarkable about it. After a while, they both stopped meditating, feeling that their chi had indeed become significantly purer. The girl, with a rare smile gracing her face, immediately noted that her frosty chi now seemed incredibly strong, almost radiating power. Only now did Linmu fully realize why her aura felt so intensely cold, and he assumed that something more profound awaited them, because this kind of unexpected fusion practice could clearly help them both immensely. The partner, intrigued by the results, suggested trying it again and asked the guy to release even more chi energy this time. Their hands came into contact once more, and a familiar, undeniably pleasant wave of pure energy immediately ran between them. This time, our heroes tried even harder, actively passing powerful chi to each other, a silent, symbiotic exchange. They sat in this deep, meditative position for an entire hour, without taking their palms off each other. Eventually, they merged so strongly, their energies intertwined so completely, that they unexpectedly began the process of moving the stars. The celestial bodies aligned perfectly, so that Linmu and Ji-Ching Lan, as if by magic, moved to another realm. The protagonist felt that the chi in this new place was incredibly dense, causing him to sense absolutely everything that was happening vividly around him. At this point, he decided to slowly open his eyes and was stunned to see that their entire view had changed quite a bit, revealing a new, fantastical landscape. The girl still had no idea what had truly happened and only wondered aloud at some refreshing, invigorating feeling that enveloped her. Linmu was greatly embarrassed by the sight of his partner, who was, to his shock, completely naked, and quickly turned away, pretending with a flushed face that he hadn't seen anything. Ji-Ching Lan finally felt that something was definitively wrong after all and, with a gasp of surprise, looked down at the form in which they continued to meditate. Her cheeks were getting redder by the second as the full, mortifying realization of what had just happened dawned on her. The next second, her emotions spilled out in an uncontrollable torrent, and her terrified scream echoed piercingly throughout the tranquil forest. When they finally got dressed, the main character was immediately slapped, a stinging retort, even though it wasn't even his fault for the whole incident. Linmu only now fully realized that everything was truly happening, even though it seemed like it was just a sweet, sensual dream. It turned out to be just an illusion, a vivid shared hallucination, so the guy desperately tried to calmly explain the whole perplexing situation to Ji-Ching Lan and wake her from her distress. The girl finally opened her eyes wide and realized that it really wasn't real, even though everything had seemed so incredibly genuine. The young man immediately guessed that because of the intense chi fusion, they were able to sense the divine consciousness beforehand, causing such an embarrassing and vivid incident for them. His partner had never heard of such bizarre cases, so she was utterly surprised to hear such an outlandish explanation. The protagonist, drawing on his profound knowledge, explained that chi fusion actually has 3 distinct stages, and thus the divine territory comes after the initial chi gathering. Linmu then revealed, with a sheepish glance, that it was because of this very divine consciousness that they were suddenly naked in their shared vision. The guy was glad that he had enough of his own cultivation knowledge to calmly and logically explain this highly unusual incident. Suddenly, the girl, who still couldn't quite bring herself to look directly at our hero, asked his name again, her voice a little shaky. The young man, still flustered, confirmed that his name was Linmu, and then Ji-Ching Lan, with an unexpected directness, asked if he had a soulmate. He took his time answering such an unexpected and deeply personal question, silently asking himself why she, a mysterious stranger, wanted to know such intimate details. The girl was annoyed that the protagonist was behaving this way, with his hesitant silence, so she yelled at him, her voice rising, and ordered him to answer faster. Lin Mu was genuinely frightened by such a harsh tone and quickly tried to prove that he was indeed single, but she didn't really believe it, her eyes narrowing. Ji Qinglan advised the young man not to dare to lie to her, because he wouldn't get out of here alive if he allowed himself to do something like that. The protagonist was still trying to figure out, with mounting confusion, why the girl had suddenly decided to ask such a personal and threatening thing. Then she, with a more subdued tone, said that her grandfather used to say that his granddaughter was sure to marry someone who would have her all to himself, implicitly her first and only partner. Lin Mu was in complete agreement with the old man's traditional belief, because he sincerely believed that girls should indeed stay with their first partner, a principle he held dear. The very next moment, the guy realized, with a dawning sense of dread, that Ji Qinglan was going to marry him, even though there was still absolutely nothing romantic between them. Now the girl sounded like a real demon, her voice suddenly commanding and chilling, and she said in an authoritative tone that now our hero must take responsibility for her, for he had seen her body and, in this shared illusion, had taken her innocence. The young man desperately tried to prove, with a rising panic, that it was all just an illusion created by the divine consciousness, and therefore, it didn't count. But the girl was absolutely sticking to her guns. She insisted that what he saw in that illusion was even more real than what he was seeing with his own two eyes right now. She even emphasized that their family had a divine territory master, and she had personally read the notes he left behind. So Lin Mu pretty quickly realized there was no way he could lie his way out of this one. Ji Qinglan wasn't going to listen to any compromises, no sir. She was dead set on marrying our protagonist. The guy, however, felt a cold dread. Marriage was a super serious thing, and he was afraid they just might not be right for each other. But the beauty just calmly repeated her grandfather's words about marriage, which instantly made our hero freeze. He knew, right then and there, that he was utterly doomed. Lin Mu, trying to buy some time, agreed that the grandfather had clearly taught his granddaughter many things and then, playing along, wondered what else the girl had learned from him. At that moment, Ji Qinglan, with a thoughtful look, said that the old man had actually told her not to get married too early, so she should wait until after graduation, and until then, she should be nice and try to find common ground with her boyfriend. Our protagonist breathed a huge sigh of relief. He honestly thought she'd insist on getting married that very day. After that, the girl, with a quick movement, vanished into thin air in the middle of the forest, leaving Lin Mu to trudge home all alone. The guy was starting to get really annoyed with all these worldly problems piling up, so he decided to shift his focus to something more productive, how to reach the initial peace stage in his cultivation faster. Just then, he suddenly felt someone rushing towards him with all their might, like a speeding bullet. His first thought was, oh no, it must be that assassin again. But turns out, it was just some random stranger, sprinting full tilt, yelling to make way for him. The guy was only a few meters away from our protagonist, but he was still rushing at full speed, clearly not planning to stop. At the very last second, Lin Mu managed to skillfully dodge out of the way and was super relieved that, thankfully, they weren't after him after all. Lin Mu watched him, thinking the stranger was definitely doing some intense short-distance running and was in a massive hurry to get somewhere. Next, our hero noticed that this speedy fugitive was being followed by a policewoman he actually knew. He still didn't suspect anything seriously wrong was going on, just assumed the girl was doing a sprint as part of her training. The young man mused that being an officer must be incredibly tough, having to do a run every single day. Lin Mu then noted that the guy was running even harder now, and only then realized there was something very strange about him. He sensed something rather intimidating, a sharp glint in the stranger's gaze. Digging into his memories, our hero realized that such a look was often found in his home world, specifically among the strongest fighters. Putting all these puzzling pieces together in his head, Lin Mu quickly figured out that the policewoman was actually chasing a dangerous criminal. At that very instant, the guy heard the chilling sounds of gunshots and his heart sank. This is bad, he thought. He realized he had just missed the culprit and now blamed himself for his inattention. Lin Mu snapped out of his daze and ran as fast as humanly possible in the direction where the gunshots were coming from. He burst into the alley and saw the policewoman already lying on the floor, and the perpetrator, a sinister figure, holding a smoking gun in his hands. The man shouted angrily that this crappy girl wouldn't even spare her own life to catch him. The girl was bleeding, but thankfully still conscious. She was incredibly lucky. Lin Mu was scared for her fate, so he immediately rushed over to help in any way he could. Our hero carefully lifted the policewoman to check where the bullet had hit. After quickly examining the girl's body, the guy realized that the wound had gone straight towards the heart, which was incredibly dangerous. He understood that, judging by her condition and the bleeding, the bullet must have just passed by a vital organ. So, it was the best situation from the worst, but still far from optimistic. The young man quickly reassured the girl, promising her she would be all right, causing a tiny spark of hope to appear in her eyes. The policewoman, ever the brave officer, asked the protagonist to leave the place and not risk his life, but he wasn't going to abandon her in trouble. The guy instead asked her to cover the wound firmly with her hand. She couldn't understand what Lin Mu, who was walking unarmed towards a dangerous criminal holding a gun, was possibly going to do. The girl thought our hero was completely crazy if he was taking such enormous risks for the sake of some stranger. The villain just laughed, scoffing at the fact that Lin Mu was trying to act like some noble hero and wasn't afraid to die at all. He thought the young man had watched too many action movies, so he decided to show him the harsh reality. The man didn't hesitate any longer and shot straight at the protagonist. The perpetrator was utterly surprised because, after a second, he saw that, for some unknown reason, he was unable to hit his target. It was still a moment before he realized, with dawning horror, that the ammunition in his gun had completely run out. The villain now seriously doubted that Lin Mu was a mere human, because he had managed to dodge the bullet so easily, like a phantom. The protagonist didn't bother to explain anything. Instead, he punched his helpless opponent squarely in the stomach with all his mighty strength. The man immediately coughed up blood and was completely unable to resist such a powerful attack. In the end, he crumpled unconsciously to the ground, but Lin Mu was confident that the criminal would stay alive. While still dealing with the villain, the young man suddenly remembered the policewoman who was on the verge of life and death. He rushed back to the girl and saw that she had lost consciousness due to heavy blood loss. To quickly check the victim's condition, the protagonist immediately thought to check her pulse. Lin Mu felt that the throbbing was very weak, so the girl absolutely had to be taken to the hospital as soon as possible, before it was too late. Everything was successful. So, when the policewoman regained consciousness, our hero recounted all the events in vivid detail. But the guy didn't want to tell her about his incredible abilities, so he cleverly lied that a man in his underwear came to their rescue and hit the criminal in the chest with all his might, saving both their lives. The injured girl actually laughed when she heard the ridiculous description of their rescuer and even asked if he had a red cape. She wasn't going to believe this obvious lie because it all sounded exactly like a cheesy superhero movie. The policewoman already wanted to threaten Lin Mu for daring to lie to her, but she felt a sharp pain and coughed, so the guy quickly asked her not to speak anymore, so as not to worsen her condition. In fact, the protagonist genuinely didn't expect that in this world there are also so-called superheroes, and he thought the girl was just messing with him. He rejoiced that he had managed to do one good thing after all and quickly took out some prepared pills from his pocket. The guy held out his special medicine to Miss Wang, the policewoman, and urged her to hurry up and take it. The girl was hesitant to take some unknown pill, so Lin Mu asked her not to worry and promised that he wasn't going to do any harm. In the end, the policewoman decided to trust our hero, but she emphasized, with a stern look, that he dare not even think of doing anything suspicious. At that moment, a doctor entered the room and announced that Wang's relatives had come to check on the patient. The protagonist immediately understood everything, so he was already about to quietly leave this place to stay out of the way. The girl said goodbye and thanked him for the medicine, and Lin Mu, with a caring tone, said that he would visit the officer again in a few days. The parents were, understandably, very worried and panicked, frantically asking the doctor if everything was okay with their beloved daughter. The girl, referring to the policewoman's colleague, or the nurse, asked them not to worry and informed them that Wang was already safe, so they could check on her. Meanwhile, our hero decided to say goodbye to Dr. Joe as well. The doctor wasn't going to let the guy go so easily, but he couldn't understand what was wrong. It turns out that the girl Dr. Joe had managed to see that he had given the patient some mysterious medicine, so now she desperately wanted to know what it was. She thought it was outrageous because seriously ill patients shouldn't be allowed to eat just anything. The protagonist asked Dr. Joe not to worry about it and quickly lied that it was just plain vitamin C. In fact, he had given Officer Wong a powerful purifying medicine that has a miraculous healing effect on injuries. The young man didn't explain any further and warned the girl Dr. Joe that he would return to the hospital in a few days. Once again, the girl Dr. Joe was left wondering, making sure that the person in front of her was not the previous Lin Mu she knew, and now she wanted to know if it was also the same one as before. The events now shift to the next morning, when the protagonist was having breakfast with his roommates. Song Leong-ru absolutely loved the food prepared by the guy himself and admired his impressive cooking talent. In turn, Zixi, ever the inquisitive one, asked why he had returned so late yesterday, and the young man had to quickly lie that he had just met a former classmate and chatted with him for a long time. The girl, still suspicious, looked into Lin Mu's eyes and asked him if it was really like that, implying he was hiding something. The protagonist immediately tensed up because he realized that his sharp-eyed roommates were beginning to doubt his words. The other friend just laughed it off and told him to ignore their acquaintance because she often liked to ask stupid questions. Song Leong-ru decided to lighten things up a bit and playfully suggested to her boyfriend that they go out tonight. Lin Mu immediately remembered that her friends were going to a classmate's birthday party. The girls asked our hero not to worry about these minor details because they thought they would easily become friends after just one meeting. Lin Mu was still not eager to go anywhere, so he tried to object, at least a little. The girlfriends, however, emphasized that there should be no objections and had already decisively chosen for the young man that he would spend the evening with them. Within a couple of hours, they were all comfortably seated in the car and headed to the place where the entire celebration was taking place. The girls chatted excitedly about how it had been ages since they had seen their old acquaintance, and they didn't even think she still remembered them. There wasn't a single topic they didn't talk about with their friend in high school, but because of her family business, they had to gradually distance themselves from each other. Song Leong-ru realized, with a touch of sadness, that there was nothing she could do about it, because they were simply living in completely different worlds now. Toward evening, they had already arrived at the desired luxurious mansion, the grand location for the party. Zixi was sure that they had arrived correctly because the invitation had specifically mentioned a restaurant hotel called Princeton. After that, they went straight into the elegant elevator and ascended to the 19th floor of the building. The protagonist was genuinely surprised that their classmate Sidu Shu was so incredibly rich that she could afford such an extravagant celebration. At that moment, the girl Song Leong-ru explained that the Situ family had been passing down their immense inheritance from generation to generation for 500 to 600 years, making it quite easy for her to accumulate such wealth. Just then, a pleasant bell sounded, notifying the company of friends that they had arrived at the correct floor. It was quite lively inside, with guests actively discussing various topics, creating a noisy, festive environment around them. Now, the protagonist agreed that this was indeed a noble and wealthy family, because just for a simple birthday party, so many important people had come. At this moment, Liangju's suitor, a persistent young man, loudly announced from the crowd, excitedly exclaiming that Liangju had also come to Miss Sidu's birthday party. The girl, not wanting to talk to him, cleverly pretended not to know the young man. The protagonist, however, didn't pay any attention at all to what was happening near him, because once again, he had that strange, familiar sensation. At this moment, he sensed the powerful aura of a true king and couldn't believe that there really was a person here who could exude such an incredibly strong energy. Eventually, the guy looked around, scanning the crowd, and he finally found the very girl who was emitting that regal aura. Lin Mu was surprised and simply couldn't understand why this seemingly ordinary woman was exuding the aura of a true king. The girl, as if sensing his gaze, looked at him, and at that moment, her gentle voice came directly into the guy's head, noting subtly that you can't stare at people so blatantly. The young man was greatly surprised that she possessed the incredible skill of telepathy, because he didn't suspect that anyone in this world was able to master such a unique technique. He became more and more interested in this world, because it turned out that there were so many high-level masters hidden here. Song Leong-ru immediately noticed that the guy was distracted by something and asked him what had caught his attention, but he wouldn't tell her and decided to move away to find a place to sit down. Eventually, the group of buddies found a vacant table where they could all be seated. Zixi immediately decided to make a playful comment about Linmu, looking at some maiden and assuming that she must be very charming, given his distracted gaze. At that very moment, the very same beauty herself, Situ Shu, came onto the stage, and her servant asked all the guests for silence. Only then did the girl Zixi realize that all this time, the main character had actually been looking intently at their acquaintance, Situ Shu. In turn, the guy was secretly glad that he was able to get information about this mysterious woman with the aura of a true king. He certainly didn't expect the source of that powerful energy to be Miss Situ herself, the very culprit of the celebration. Meanwhile, the girl herself, Situ Shu, tensed up because she realized that the young man was beginning to guess about her hidden talents. She began to fear that someone might actually be able to unravel her family's ancient secret. In the end, the birthday girl bravely pulled herself together to thank her guests for taking the time to congratulate her on her special day. The girl wished everyone present a good time and subtly used her hidden powers to charm everyone around her even more, making them feel even happier and more receptive. The guests were absolutely delighted to hear such kind words from everyone's favorite Miss Situ, and once again, wished her a happy birthday with renewed enthusiasm. The protagonist realized that, as it turned out, the birthday girl was also a master of charm, judging by the incredibly strong reactions of all present. Meanwhile, the servant asked all the guests to line up to present the gifts they had meticulously prepared. As if on cue, everyone left their seats at the tables, eager to give their present as quickly as possible. Everyone was talking excitedly about how Miss Situ was simply irresistible, but the girl, with a modest smile, only said that they had too high an opinion of her. There were even representatives of successful companies who clearly hoped the birthday girl would appreciate their extravagant gift. She couldn't stop thanking everyone in attendance for their time in giving such wonderful and thoughtful gifts. The protagonist then, with a confused look, asked his girlfriends where their presents were and why they were still sitting in their seats. Song Liang-ru explained that only truly valuable gifts would be personally handed over to the owner on stage, and ordinary gifts didn't need to be brought up to the stage, they could just be handed over to the administrator. Linmu never thought that there could be so much fuss just to give an ordinary birthday present. In the end, he asked his girlfriends to wait here while he too gave a prepared present for Miss Situ. The girls were absolutely shocked by this turn of events, because it was perfectly visible that the young man had come here completely empty-handed. Zixi quickly asked our hero not to do anything foolish, because she was sure he hadn't brought anything with him. The guy was going to agree that it was all a bit silly, but he still wanted to personally give his gift to Situ Shu anyway. The girl Situ Shu herself saw Lin Mu as a serious, intriguing threat, so she wanted to see what he was all about. The guards immediately stopped the young man, because they could not, under any circumstances, let a stranger get near their mistress. The protagonist didn't panic for a second and calmly explained that he wanted to dedicate a few words for Miss Situ, emphasizing, with a knowing look, that she could really use it. All the guests started laughing loudly at the fact that he was going to give the birthday girl such a pathetic gift of mere words. Zixi had had a hard time watching all of this, and now she was certain that their friend was definitely overreacting. The girl Situ Shu intervened in this little conflict and, with an air of graciousness, stated that she was extremely grateful to the gentleman, so she was willing to listen to him. In truth, she just wanted to see what this strange guy could pull off. Lin Mu himself was not at all afraid of judgment and ridicule from others, because he was absolutely confident in his actions and the power of his words. He finally said, in a serious tone, that this conversation was not for prying ears, because Mrs. Situ needed to hear the words in person, directly from him. The servant began to be annoyed by this impertinent behavior of the young man, because he had already managed to get the full attention of the birthday girl. In turn, Situ Shu noticed that our hero was far from being a beginner or a simpleton, so she couldn't figure out what he was truly trying to accomplish. The girl asked her subordinates to let the guy get up on stage to talk to her in person. After all, the old servant couldn't go against his mistress's clear orders, so he let Lin Mu pass, who briefly thanked him for the opportunity. The main character quickly made his way to the stage while the birthday girl waited silently, a curious expression on her face, for his unusual gift. The guy was so reluctant for anyone else to hear his words that he quietly whispered the intended message directly into her ear. All the guests were incredibly displeased that the scoundrel was so brazen that he dared to get so close to Miss Situ. Meanwhile, a look of profound surprise slowly spread across the girl's face as our hero came to the end of his whispered message. In the end, Linmu explained that this was the pair of words he wanted to give to Miss Situ for her birthday, and hoped that she would truly benefit from them, a cryptic promise. After a second, a bright smile appeared on the birthday girl's face, and she happily thanked the guy for his enlightenment and for this captivating show. None of the guests had yet gotten such a strong, positive reaction from the girl, so everyone was wondering what deep, meaningful words he had said. Afterward, our hero returned to his girlfriends and immediately noticed that they had suspiciously disgruntled faces, clearly upset. A flustered Song Leong-ru explained that the guy had scared them to death, causing them to become very worried about him. Zixi was already thinking that he was going to put on some kind of crazy show here, which definitely wouldn't end well. Linmu immediately apologized to the girls for making them worry so much. At this point, the birthday girl herself, Situ Shu, came right up to them and said hello to all her friends. Situ Shu immediately noted that this guy, Linmu, who was able to surprise her so profoundly with his present, was their buddy, so she immediately asked them to introduce our hero. Linmu immediately stood up from his seat to get to know the girl better, feeling a slight flush of embarrassment. After that, they both gracefully folded their hands in a welcoming, respectful gesture and exchanged pleasantries. Zixi couldn't understand why they were doing this and joked that her friends were portraying martial artists straight from the movies. The main character didn't even know how to respond to that, because it was literally true, so he blanched for a few awkward seconds. The girl Situ Shu just laughed off the joke and noted that her friend Zixi remained just as funny. After saying goodbye to her friends, she went straight to the Situ family estate where she met up with her father. The old man turned to his daughter and immediately asked if she had a good time at her holiday banquet. The girl replied briefly that all had gone well and went straight to the subject she wished to discuss with the head of the family. She hugged her father tightly and confessed that she no longer wanted to study in Kyoto and earnestly asked him to bring her back to Dunhai, because she wanted to go to the local university there. The old man couldn't understand what had happened, because earlier, his daughter herself had strongly insisted on going to university in Kyoto. Situ Shu looked at him, her eyes sincere, and replied that she just wanted to stay with her dad in Dunhai. This simple, heartfelt answer deeply touched the father, so he no longer doubted his daughter's decision. He hugged the girl tightly and laughed out loud with pure joy, because she really made him happy with those sweet words. It turns out that Shushu was doing all this just to meet Linmu, who was the only one she knew who could point out her 4 hidden flaws. Meanwhile, events shift to the karate gym, where an intense training session was just taking place. A man named Lucien Zaijiro informed his partners that he was going to assault them, playfully challenging them. He let out a powerful martial shout and swung around to deliver his first crushing blow. Even though the other guys were in full defense, it was still incredibly hard for them to hold back such a strong, precise attack. The man's partners were flying in different directions, sent sprawling, because they simply couldn't stay on their feet. In the next second, Lucien Zaijiro, with incredible power, swung his leg and declared, with fierce determination, that he wasn't done with this fight yet. The guys didn't expect things to turn out this way, so they didn't even react in time to their president's rapid actions. The blow hit 2 fighters at once, who barely managed to block it at the very last moment. The man was not at all pleased that they had been knocked down by such a seemingly slight blow. The guys had nothing else to do but simply apologize profusely to the president for their perceived weakness. Lucien Zaijiro didn't stand aside for long and helped his disciples stand up to continue their rigorous training. All the guys didn't mind and quickly got ready for the next exercise. The man also announced, in the most serious tone possible, that it was already time to visit one particular person. Meanwhile, the main character, Linmu, did not suspect anything at all and continued to live his usual, peaceful student life. At one of the breaks, the guy had already met his new acquaintance and was very surprised to see her at his university. His friends playfully joked that it had suddenly turned cold around them because that ice girl, Ji-Ching Lan, had come here. It turned out that she was just looking for Linmu and wanted to talk to him about some important topic. The guy couldn't understand what had happened, and why his acquaintance wanted to step away somewhere with such urgency. Ji-Ching Lan was annoyed that the young man kept asking such stupid questions, so she just took him firmly under her arm and pulled him aside, away from the prying eyes and ears. She emphasized, with a slight huff, that she was not going to eat our hero, so she asked him to just go quietly with her. Meanwhile, the other disciples, watching this unfold, thought that the Ice Lady knew how to love after all, and they couldn't believe that Lin Mu was able to win another beauty. Eventually, the guys accepted the fact that he was simply born so cool, he could do whatever he wanted. Parallel to the students' conversation, the protagonist was already trying to find out from his acquaintance what was so important about this case that required so much caution. The girl explained, her voice a little softer, that her father wanted to meet Lin Mu, so he would go to their house tonight. The young man tensed when he heard such unexpected news and immediately wondered what it was all for. Ji-Ching Lan embarrassedly explained that she had told her dad about their incident, the illusion and marriage talk, after which he, quite surprisingly, said that he wanted to meet his future son-in-law. The protagonist was not happy that she was so quick to tell her relatives about the incident, because they had agreed to wait and keep it quiet. The girl immediately started yelling at him, thinking that Lin Mu had already changed his mind about marrying her. The young man still wasn't in a hurry to agree, because he felt that he couldn't just casually accept such a huge commitment. They were distracted from their rather tense conversation by some stranger who was just looking for Mr. Lin Mu. After this sudden encounter, the protagonist was walking backwards so fast that the girl couldn't keep up with him. She said that this Yagyu Kojiro had never lost at Tokyo University, so she was worried that the guy just couldn't handle such an opponent. But that news only fueled Lin Mu's interest. After our hero had been to the temple, he didn't have a worthy opponent to truly try out his new powers, so he eagerly hoped that this Sayajiro wouldn't disappoint him now. The events now rewind back half an hour, to when the young man first met his new rival. Yagyu Kojiro introduced himself as the proud president of the Tokyo University Karate Club and, with a challenging gaze, asked Mr. Lin Mu to fight him. Ji-Ching Lan was angry that their private conversation had been interrupted, and she emphasized that she didn't care at all whether he was Sayajiro or Shao anything. Yagyu Kojiro apologized to her but still insisted on a duel and was about to threaten Lin Mu if he didn't agree. Ji-Ching Lan was very serious, so she asked him what he was going to do to her fiancé. At this moment, Lin Mu himself intervened, blocking his acquaintance's path, and calmly replied that he was accepting the challenge from the president of the karate club. Yagyu Kojiro then thanked Lin Mu for the opportunity and informed him that he would be waiting for him at the school stadium at 6 o'clock tonight. In fact, our hero also felt that his opponent was quite strong, but he asked Ji-Ching Lan not to worry about it, promising her, with a confident smile, that he would definitely win. The girl still wouldn't calm down and asked him not to announce such a thing so early in the evening. That evening, there were quite a number of people gathered at the university sports stadium, watching Yagyu Kojiro intently and eagerly waiting for the highly anticipated fight to begin. Yagyu Kojiro himself sat quietly, meditating to gather his strength before the duel. The karate students had heard that the man their president challenged today was very strong, but they were still confidently certain that he was no match for their invincible leader. The girls in the audience immediately took notice when the main character, Lin Mu, walked into the hall and, with admiring whispers, noted that he was a real looker. The guy walked in accompanied by Ji-Ching Lan, who was very worried about him, so she didn't want to leave him alone for a second. Lin Mu felt a little uncomfortable because he couldn't understand why everyone around him was staring at him so intently. Karate club members were visibly disappointed when they saw their president's opponent, because by the looks of it, he seemed like a real wimp. Before the duel began, the guy asked one crucial question to Yagyu Kojiro, inquiring why he had decided to make this sparring match so urgent. The club president became even more serious when he was about to talk about the reasons for his decision. He explained that he was a friend of Mr. Li Guanyu and had heard that our hero handled him easily, which clearly showed the high level of his skills. Yagyu Kojiro asked the guy to understand him correctly and emphasized that he was not going to avenge his acquaintance. The protagonist immediately remembered that it was about the same young man who was either harassing or grooming Teacher Song. Yagyu Kojiro thought that Lin Mu was strong on the outside and strong in heart, so he would genuinely like to exchange his experience in this duel. Now the young man, Lin Mu, understood the true reason for this challenge, so he decided not to fight at full strength, as it was just an exchange of experience, not a death match. Yagyu Kojiro didn't like it right away, because he wanted his opponent to be unmerciful. Whenever the karateka himself fights, he fights as hard as he can, because it was a simple sign of respect for his opponent. The protagonist heard his opponent's sincere words and readily agreed to exchange experiences in this friendly fight. The club president immediately got into a ready fighting stance and asked the young man to attack first. In the end, Yagyu Kojiro struck first, and this attack was incredibly accurate and lightning fast. Lin Mu was shocked that his opponent was so strong he didn't even immediately react to the blow. At the very last moment, the young man was still able to skillfully dodge his opponent's lightning-fast fist. Now our hero had verified that this Yagyu Kojiro was indeed much stronger than Li Wugo, whom he had dealt with quite easily. But at the same time, he was sure that this guy was still far from his own power level. Yagyu Kojiro was a very experienced fighter, so he never stopped attacking Lin Mu for a second, who only had time to place his blocks. Despite the blinding speed of his attacks, the protagonist had no problem effortlessly dodging each one. All the karate students were actively supporting their president, chanting his name and waiting for him to knock out his opponent. Ji-Ching Lan suspected that any inexperienced person would probably think that Yagyu Kojiro was completely suppressing Lin Mu, and that the latter was now at a disadvantage. But in fact, you could clearly see that the movements of the main character were not chaotic at all. It was as if he was playfully toying with his opponent, testing his endurance. The guy was even able to dodge an incredibly strong leg kick that seemed destined to be fatal. He did agree that it was pretty close after all, because the karate master almost managed to hit him. At this moment, Yagyu Kojiro finally stopped, huffing and puffing, because his strength was running out, and his breathing was starting to hit a snag. He couldn't understand why Master Lin Mu was only defending himself and assumed that the guy was looking down on him, taking him lightly. Our hero got embarrassed and quickly apologized, explaining that he was scrutinizing his opponent's techniques, which caused him to forget that they were actually competing. The club president was surprised that the youngster had enough time to meticulously learn his techniques while concurrently being on defense. Meanwhile, Lin Mu got into a fighting stance and, with a confident look, announced that he was finally going to attack his opponent. Yagyu Kojiro, despite his obvious fatigue, bravely prepared to take this blow. He didn't even have time to finish his sentence when he felt a hard, concussive push right in his stomach. Yagyu Kojiro couldn't understand why our hero stopped and didn't continue his attack. Lin Mu ended up attacking his opponent so hard that he literally flew through the air. Yagyu Kojiro couldn't do anything about it, so he fell to the floor with a resounding rumble, clearly in shame. None of the audience could understand what had just happened, because they only had time to see our hero suddenly appear in front of the president of the karate club, like a ghost. Ji-Ching Lan was also shocked by such an amazing speed from her future fiancé. Yagyu Kojiro himself couldn't understand what had just happened either, and now tried to get to his feet, struggling. He realized he had been careless in this battle and gathered his last ounce of strength to finally stand up. Our hero, Lin Mu, was surprised that his opponent could no longer get up, even though he had only released a small amount of chi. Now the guy was disappointed, because actually, in this fight, he had wanted to truly test his accumulated power, but now there was no such opportunity. For his part, Yagyu Kojiro was not going to give up, even though he had already clearly realized the massive gap between himself and Master Lin Mu. Yagyu Kojiro fighting spirit was still at an all-time high, so he confidently shouted that he wouldn't give up so easily. The protagonist was surprised that his fighting spirit had suddenly risen so dramatically, but he was sure that it was all useless. Yagyu Kojiro was already about to deliver another crushing blow and finally wanted to hit his opponent. He was sure that this time he was bound to achieve his goal. The fighter made one accurate lunge forward, but ended up feeling like he hit nothing. Yagyu Kojiro was shocked by this turn of events and couldn't understand how this was even possible. It turned out that the main character had just grabbed him by the shoulder, so now Yagyu Kojiro couldn't figure out what kind of incredible person he was. Lin Mu replied briefly that he was the same kind of person as his rival, but he was just studying at Dunhai University. The young man decided he was going to act tough, so he apologized to his opponent. Grabbing Yagyu Kojiro firmly by the shoulder, our hero tossed him aside in a sharp, almost effortless motion. After that, Yagyu Kojiro's head hit the floor with a dull thud, and now he definitely could not continue this fight. The president of the karate club was left utterly convinced that the protagonist definitely had inhuman strength. After that, the protagonist went to the Ji family mansion and was already there by evening. The girl's grandfather immediately inquired what plans our hero had with Ji Qing. Lin Mu didn't know how to answer this question because he didn't have any specific plans at the moment. This made the old man very angry, as he thought the young man wasn't going to marry his granddaughter and was just going to abandon her. Lin Mu then tried to explain that he didn't mean that at all, emphasizing that he wanted to graduate from university first. The old man, unconvinced, already believed his daughter had no future with this young man and dismissed it as just a marriage game. Ji Qinglong quickly tried to explain that it wasn't like that at all and begged her grandfather not to worry, promising that in just 2 years, her fiancé would graduate from university. The head of the family, still stern, explained that the problem wasn't their hurry, but the young man's attitude toward the situation. He called his granddaughter stupid, explaining that after graduation everyone would go their own way, and her fiancé might simply run away. At the same time, Lin Mu was secretly annoyed that Ji Qinglong herself was dragging him into this whole messy situation, and now he was the one getting blamed. Meanwhile, the old man couldn't understand why the girl chose this particular guy, who seemed to have no ambition. The granddaughter desperately tried to explain to her grandfather that her fiancé was nothing like that. Mr. Ji could no longer listen to the girl and finally declared that he would not consent to this marriage. At this point, Lin Mu decided to intervene in the conversation, apologizing for doing so. He calmly confirmed that he had no immediate plans and wasn't going to make excuses because his own future was still actively being planned. He realized that by coming here today, he had caused everyone a lot of inconvenience, which was entirely his fault, and promised that it wouldn't happen again. After making this statement, Lin Mu quickly headed towards the exit and said goodbye to the Ji family. Ji Qinglong did not appreciate this development at all, so she frantically asked her groom to wait. Her grandfather emphasized, with the utmost seriousness in his voice, that this guy was not going to be anything outstanding and asked his granddaughter to just trust him. Ji Qinglong didn't listen to the old man and still begged the protagonist not to leave. Eventually, she couldn't stand it anymore and burst into tears because Grandpa didn't understand her feelings at all. The girl ran out of the hall, but the old man still continued to be indifferently silent. His son Ji Qinglong's father finally raised his voice, thinking the last sentence was too harsh. After all, the head of the family realized that although the Lin family was strong, it was no match for their own bloodline. He explained that he only wanted to check whether the young man really loved his granddaughter or was looking for personal gain. If the groom had ulterior motives, he would have made concessions, but in the end, he couldn't handle even that little bit of pressure. Ji Qinglong's father still felt that Lin Mu was understandable, because no one would be thrilled to be spoken to like this. Ji Qinglong's grandfather still firmly believed that this guy couldn't be changed anymore, so even if he married Ji Qinglong, he still wouldn't truly join their family. Ji Qinglong's father accepted that his father's stubborn nature could not be changed, so he decided to leave things as they were for the time being. He himself thought that Lin Mu was a good kid, so he hoped that the young man's arrogance would eventually subside. Meanwhile, our hero, Lin Mu, thought about the fact that there were so many different situations in the cultivation world, but they never made him feel guilty. So, he didn't expect that he would actually get genuinely angry today. Other than that, he started to feel his chi begin to weaken, but he eventually wrote it off to the fact that the original energy of this body was incredibly weak. The guy couldn't understand what it was about this Ji family that they dared to look down on him, and came to the conclusion that he didn't need to be so reserved next time. The main character suddenly stopped because he encountered something on the way to his house. Turns out, some guy ran out at him, holding his head and frantically begging to save him. Lin Mu immediately thought that this fatty seemed very familiar to him. After a few seconds, he remembered that this was the same Xing Weiyang who had cheated men and molested women at the university. The guy immediately wondered what could have possibly happened to a rugged bully like him in the middle of the night. The frightened bully, Xing Weiyang, tried to catch his breath and rejoiced that he was able to meet his acquaintance. It turned out that he was being chased by a horde of angry bandits who wanted to take his life right here and now. The protagonist was even more surprised when he learned the details of the situation. Xing Weiyang panicked a lot and begged his classmate to save him, because otherwise, he would definitely die that night at the hands of the bandits. The bandits, seeing Lin Mu, told him they only wanted the fat man, so the protagonist must get out of their way if he didn't want to die with him. Xing Weiyang had already heard that our hero was able to defeat Yagyu Kojiro, so this gangster gang was definitely not a problem for him. Lin Mu was actually excited about this opportunity, because he was just in a bad mood today, so he could perfectly blow off some steam on these bullies. The bandits didn't expect this kid to act this way. They thought he had had enough of life. Lin Mu explained that it was his classmate, so he had to help sort out the problems and just couldn't stand by. Eventually, the gangsters decided that they needed to end this pointless chatter, and their leader ordered the two students to be caught for him. They advised the young man not to be so ignorant and arrogant, and sarcastically agreed to help the protagonist if he wanted to die so badly. Lin Mu felt that bullies of this level would not give him any trouble, so he was not worried at all about the outcome of this fight. Xing Weiyang still asked the guy to be careful because these guys kill people without even blinking. Such information only fueled the interest of the protagonist, who was looking for a worthy opponent for himself. The young man stepped forward confidently and prepared to teach the bullies a cruel lesson that they would remember for a long time. He wanted to beat them half to death because he was sure that only then would they be able to understand something. The bandits didn't wait any longer and had already swarmed towards the protagonist, who was concentrating the chi in his body to definitely win this fight. Lin Mu put all the energy in his hand to teach his opponent a lesson, who was the very first to run in front of his partners. The guy threw his arm forward sharply, taking a steady stance, his palm open like a human shield, ready to turn into a weapon at any moment. The end result was that the bandit flew off to the side without ever reaching his target. Xing Weiyang was still very worried that by doing so, the protagonist was taking a great risk and could make an irreversible mistake. The young man himself was not afraid at all, because his techniques were strong and accurate, so the bandits flew away from him in different directions. After that, Lin Mu breathed a sigh of relief because he had succeeded after all, and it gave him confidence. In turn, the fat man couldn't believe his eyes, because everything looked like a scene straight out of a martial arts movie. The next day, after the showdown with the bandits, the protagonist was calmly walking through the streets of the city and heard someone calling him. The guy couldn't figure out what was going on, so he turned back around in surprise. Turns out it was the same fat guy, Xing Weiyang, who had decided to profusely thank his savior and promised that he could now solve any of his problems. It wasn't difficult for the protagonist, so he was embarrassed when he heard so much gratitude, but for Xing Weiyang, it meant a lot, because his life was on the line. Suddenly, Xing Weiyang fell to his knees to show his respect for Lin Mu and promised to always follow Big Brother. Lin Mu asked his classmate to stand up, saying it was too much, and then asked why those people were chasing him that night. Fatty said that the bandits were from Anjia, where he had insulted the leader of that group named Pai Han Qing, causing him to bring the trouble on himself. At that moment, two hurrying guys were passing by them, saying that there was some kind of spectacle going on near the school gate. Xing Weiyang grabbed one of them and wondered what it was that the disciples were in such a hurry for. Then the students said that their ice girl, Ji Qing Lan, was going to fight someone, and they rumored that her opponent was some other beautiful girl. The protagonist was surprised to hear this because he would never have thought his acquaintance could pick a fight with someone. Fatty also agreed that it would be a good sight, so he suggested that Lin Mu go and look at the sight. The guy replied briefly that he was in no mood at all to engage in such entertainment, so he asked his classmate to go there alone. Xing Weiyang realized that our hero didn't have any important things to do anyway. In this way, he would at least have some fun, so he forcefully dragged him along with him. Lin Mu had no choice left, so he asked his friend to at least not drag him, because he could walk on his own. None of the students could figure out what had happened because the two girls had been tensely standing opposite each other for a long time. Everyone around them already wanted to see a real fight, so they began to whip up their opponents. At this moment, the protagonist and his escort in the form of Xing Weiyang began to make their way through the excited crowd. In the end, Lin Mu saw that Ji Qing Lan's opponent was the familiar Sister Situ. The girl herself also didn't seem to expect to meet the protagonist here, so she turned around sharply when she heard a familiar voice. The guy immediately inquired why his acquaintance had come to this university. Situ completely forgot about her rival in a couple of seconds because she wanted to say hello to our hero. Everyone around was shocked when they realized that even this girl was familiar with the protagonist and couldn't understand why he was familiar with all the beauties around. Ji-Ching Lan immediately approached the guy and asked him to be careful because she didn't trust her rival at all. It turns out that Situ was asking about Lin Mu's whereabouts, causing Ji-Ching Lan to suspect that she had some kind of score to settle with him. Miss Situ herself noted, with a slight smirk, that our hero was a great success among women, since he was protected by such beauties. The guy tried to explain to Ji-Ching Lan that they were acquainted with this girl, who wasn't a bad person at all. Meanwhile, Xing Weiyang began to disperse all the gawkers and shouted to them that there was nothing more to see here. Now they could talk normally, and the protagonist inquired why Sister Situ had come to Dunhai University. The girl told him that she had just transferred here from her past Kyoto University. Ji-Ching Lan had heard that Kyoto University was the best university in China, so she couldn't understand why she would turn down such a prestigious institution and enroll here. Situ Shu bluntly replied that she wanted to become classmates with Lin Mu and ask him for some advice. The next day, all the guys at the university had already learned about the new beauty who recently transferred to them. They were looking at Situ Shu's photo and speculated that their university's current beauty's position could easily change because she had a worthy rival. Meanwhile, all of our hero's neighbors, having met their old acquaintance, gathered in the dining room and discussed where that strange girl could have come from. Song Liangru told them that Situ Shu's rival was Ji-Ching Lan, who was known as the Snow Queen at the university. Hearing such a nickname, the girl immediately assumed that this beauty was apparently very arrogant and indifferent. Maybe that was true, but for the main character, Ji-Ching Lan tried to be nice and even brought a bento for him to eat together. Lin Mu thanked her for taking such care but informed her that he wouldn't be able to eat that much food. Zixi pointed out that the girl Ji-Ching Lan only treated her lover like this, and she would have frozen the others on the spot. Now Situ Shu realized that this beauty Ji-Ching Lan was her friend's Lin Mu's rival in love. The girl Situ Shu was greatly embarrassed when she heard such an assumption and asked them not to say such nonsense. The other girlfriends also started trying to convince her that there was no reason why they could like the main character, but it all didn't sound particularly convincing. Situ Shu laughed with this reaction from the girls and told them not to worry because she was just kidding. Meanwhile, Lin Mu was approached again by some stranger who was looking for him. Ji-Ching Lan immediately became angry because someone dared to interrupt their conversation. The man apologized for the interruption in their meal and explained that their master wanted to discuss something with Mr. Lin. The guy immediately noticed that the stranger was big but didn't look like someone looking for a fight, so he calmly asked who their boss was. Ji-Ching Lan wondered why their master didn't come here himself to talk to Lin Mu. The protagonist tried to calm her down and asked her not to bother people, and if there was really something serious there, he would deal with all the problems quickly. The guards nodded politely, thanking him for his cooperation, and invited him to follow them. Ji-Ching Lan asked Lin Mu to be more careful, and he couldn't believe that she still didn't trust his skills. The bodyguards led our hero to the car and asked him to wait a minute until they reported his arrival. They told their master the whole situation, and he asked the young man to get into his car. The man immediately asked if Lin Mu remembered him after their last meeting. The protagonist immediately remembered that it was the father of the policewoman named Wang. The gentleman immediately noted that the young one had a pretty good memory, because the young man was able to memorize him after one brief encounter. The man immediately decided to cut to the chase and emphasized that this time all hope was only on Lin Mu. The guy immediately emphasized that Wang was his friend, so he didn't mind helping with her problems, and asked what her condition was. The father reported that his daughter's rehabilitation went well, and asked our hero to stop by for a visit if he had time to do so. Lin Mu was only happy to have this opportunity and promised that he would definitely drop by their family in a few days. Eventually, the man inquired as to what the old man had sought him out for this time. The man realized that there was no point in dragging the rubber any longer, so he decided to move on to explaining the whole situation. He finished his story when they had already arrived at the right place and emphasized that things were serious, because otherwise he wouldn't have looked for Lin Mu. The protagonist started to worry because he agreed to help but wasn't a doctor to look into the problem in detail. The old man didn't see it as a problem at all, so he asked the young man to put his best foot forward and asked if he needed anything, promising that they would get everything that existed in this world. Already sitting in the chamber were the agitated military men who couldn't understand why their acquaintances still hadn't shown up. They rejoiced when they saw that Mr. Wong had finally arrived on the scene. The man asked with concern in his voice how their leader was feeling right now. The soldiers reported that their head was still in a coma and that probably didn't bode well. Everyone felt very strongly about the old man's condition because as an important leader, he is of great importance to China. Mr. Wong explained that if he is gone, the situation in the country will face serious problems. The protagonist asked him not to worry and promised that he would carefully do his best. He asked everyone to leave the room to wait outside, and the man emphasized that the leader's life was now only in the hands of the guy himself. The soldiers were still not sure that this young man could be trusted with such an important assignment. Mr. Wong was sure it was okay, because earlier this young man had saved his own daughter. At this time, the protagonist began to examine the patient and was going to find out the cause of his illness first. The guy concentrated, letting a thin stream of chi energy flow through his pulse, letting it slowly spread through his body, exploring every cell as if scanning the patient from the inside. After all, he did find some peculiarity in the leader's body. Lin Mu saw that the man had no obvious organ abnormalities, which was not like most people who had reached their limit. This situation puzzled the young man, so he began to suspect that he might have missed something. The protagonist didn't give up and decided to try again, but this time he channeled more of his energy into the patient's body. He concentrated all his attention on it to notice exactly what the main problem was. In the end, the guy finally managed to feel that the old man had a heart condition. Turns out there was too much dirt in the right atrial artery, and it had been there for a long time, leading to a long-term lack of oxygen in the body and a massive organ failure. Lin Mu now calmed down because it was just a matter of time before a relieved smile appeared on his face. He would be sure that if one directly used qi, one could quickly cure the heart. The soldiers who waited under the door weren't sure if their leader could survive all this. After all, it was at this point that the protagonist came out of the room and said that the leader was fine and would wake up very soon. Everyone, of course, rejoiced at the news, but they did not expect the problem to be solved so quickly. The man, Mr. Wong, still didn't calm down and asked Lin Mu how much longer their head would last. Our hero explained that the root of the disease had been eliminated, but the body of the elderly man was already depleted, so if his energy was dead, he would last about half a year. Now the events are moved forward 3 days after the guy managed to save the leader of the country. The old man had already taken his workplace and was outraged at what had happened during his absence. Commander-in-Chief Duan Fuxing was greatly displeased that his opponents had already started to act, even though he hadn't even died yet. Mr. Wang listened to all of this and asked the teacher Duan Fuxing not to get heated because he definitely shouldn't be nervous. Then the old man calmed down and thought that he needed to live at least a few more years to deal with the situation, but at the same time realized that he didn't have that much time. The man, Mr. Wang, tried to reassure the leader and assured him that he was past the hardships of his illness. The commander-in-chief asked him not to calm him down, because he felt the state of his body very well and was sure that he would not be able to pass this final test to the end. Other than that, he admired the fact that the person who had saved him was a youth and wondered if Lin Mu would come to visit him today. Mr. Wang said that everything had already been done for this meeting, so the guy would arrive here soon. It was at that moment that the doorbell rang, and the assistant announced that the guest had arrived. The man rose from his seat, greeting the protagonist, and noted with slight irony that they had just talked about him, and he had already appeared as if he sensed it. Afterward, he happily introduced the youngster who had saved the commander-in-chief's life. Lin Mu immediately bowed his head respectfully and introduced himself to the leader. Duan Fuxing asked the guy to hurry up and sit down so that they could talk about all the events that had happened in the past few days. The old man also added that our hero wasn't a soldier, so he could safely call him just Grandpa Duan. The commander-in-chief joked that if it wasn't for Lin Mu's help, that old bag of bones would definitely not have lived to see today. The young man was embarrassed because he thought that Grandpa Duan was exaggerating, since the treatment was not difficult for him, and moreover, he was still unable to eliminate the root cause entirely. In turn, Duan Fuxing thought that our hero was too humble, because he had literally managed to save his life, which was already very good. He explained that at that age, you don't take some things seriously anymore, so for him, death is no longer scary. The protagonist looked at the old man with sincere respect, admiring his innate wisdom and ability to perceive life so broadly that even the thought of death caused him neither fear nor excitement. At this moment, Mr. Wong reported that the food was already ready, so he suggested continuing the conversation already at the table. The leader immediately stated that they should have fun today and offered to have a couple sips to cheer themselves up. That evening, Miss Sidhu also came to her house and continued her investigation about the protagonist. Her aide reported that there were new advances today regarding Sidhu's shoes order. The girl rejoiced at such news and gathered herself to listen attentively to her subordinate. The aide reported that Lin Mu arrived at the War Ministry in the afternoon, where he was brought by military vehicles and stayed there for 3 hours. Sidhu Shu immediately wanted to know why he had stayed in the ministry for so long, but that was unknown to anyone. The girl was very angry with her subordinate and ordered her to quickly get to work and find out what was going on within those walls. The assistant didn't object and bowed and went to do her task. Sidhu Shu herself began to freak out because the protagonist turned out to be such a mysterious person. The thought of why the protagonist visited the War Ministry was now constantly rolling around in the girl's head, giving her no rest. The next day, all the students gathered outside Dunhai University because they saw some suitor with a bouquet of flowers. No one could figure out who it was standing at the gate so early in the morning, but everyone suspected he was looking for their university's flower, a beautiful girl. Everyone was already waiting to see some kind of spectacle and expected it to be hot right now, but this guy's sweetheart still hadn't arrived. Next, the students saw the latest model Lamborghini stop near the entrance and couldn't even guess who it belonged to. It turned out to be Sidhu Shu, who had yet to realize what was happening at the university gates. Seeing the huge crowd, the girl couldn't understand why everyone was gathered at the entrance so early today. The guy, noticing the girl he wanted, instantly became animated, clutched the bouquet tighter, and rushed towards her. She was greatly surprised when she realized that it was her acquaintance named Yen Lanchi. She couldn't understand how he ended up here. The guy explained that he couldn't leave the girl and hoped she would like these oriental blue roses. She was very pleased with the attention from her suitor and thanked him for such a sudden gift. The young man wondered why Sidhu Shu suddenly switched to Dunhai University and didn't even warn him about this decision. The girl lied that she just wanted to come to Dunhai to spend more time with her parents. In fact, Yen Lanchi wasn't going to believe it from the beginning, and Sidhu Shu couldn't understand what he was getting at. He could bet it was because of one guy, and he turned around because Lin Mu was just walking nearby. The girl opened her eyes wide. Her lips parted for a moment in surprise, for her acquaintance had just pointed out the real reason for her transition. Just at that moment, the protagonist was walking down the street, and his new associate, Xing Weong, was walking beside him. The guy Yen Lanchi pointed out that there was a very intimate conversation between Sidhu Shu and this guy Lin Mu at her birthday party and asked what it was that he said to her. Miss Sidhu's eyes flashed with rage at the fact that her acquaintance dared to pry into her private affairs. Yen Lanchi recalled that the girl was actually his fiancée, so it was normal for him to ask about such things. The girl felt that even if she were to be a wife, she should not inform him of such things. The groom Yen Lanchi frowned, his gaze becoming intense and suspicious, because he began to suspect that Lin Mu liked Sidhu Shu. Eventually, the girl herself confirmed it, so she asked the guy Yen Lanchi not to hit on her anymore to make everyone feel comfortable. Yen Lanchi froze in place, his eyes widened in shock, and his voice trembled as he questioned whether she realized the full weight of the words she had just spoken. Sidhu Shu could no longer tolerate her former fiancé, and eventually directly replied that she wasn't joking at all. At the same time, the protagonist and Xing Weong came closer and saw that something strange was happening near the gate. Lin Mu was surprised to see such feminine qi emanating from this guy Yen Lanchi, because this was the first time he had seen something like this. Fatty Xing Weong immediately noticed the sudden change of mood of his comrade, because he suddenly became cheerful for some reason. The protagonist didn't bother to explain the reason for his joy and wanted to leave this place, but Xing Weong didn't want to go because the fun wasn't over yet. Yen Lanchi was incredibly angry that this guy Lin Mu dared to even look at his woman. He wasn't going to give Lin Mu any chance because he dared to fight for his fiancée. In the evening of the same day, the protagonist couldn't figure out where the fatty Xing Weiyang had brought him because it all looked rather mysterious. Xing Weiyang asked his comrade to calm down because it wouldn't be long before he would find out all the details. At the entrance of the place, they were met by two guards who opened in sync and kindly greeted their guests. The guy eventually assumed that a friend had decided to bring him to some charity dinner. Linmu would never have guessed that his comrade was interested in charity projects. The fat man proudly announced that this was not just a charity dinner and said that it wouldn't be long before our hero found out everything. They walked a little further, and at that moment the protagonist felt some strange sensation on his hand. The main character couldn't understand what was happening because a ring from the past world suddenly appeared on his hand. Xing Weiyang immediately noticed that something strange was happening because his comrade had turned pale for no reason. The young man tried to hide his hand and asked if there was a restroom, lying that he must have eaten something wrong. The fatty replied that the restroom was in front, and then Lin Mu asked him to wait here for a few minutes. The protagonist quickly ran into one of the available booths and tried to somehow solve the problem with the ring that had suddenly appeared. The guy examined his hand carefully and tried to figure out what could have triggered it. Lin Mu realized that the ring wanted to break free, and if he didn't suppress it, the consequences could be unimaginable. To obtain this talisman, he almost died in the cultivation world, so there shouldn't be any more mistakes here. Suddenly the protagonist heard some familiar female voice directly addressing him. It turned out that it was Situshu who had unknowingly appeared here. Our hero nervously clutched the hand with the ring and emphasized that it was actually the men's room. The girl didn't see it as a problem because there was no one here and was also surprised that Lin Mu had decided to take an interest in charity. Lin Mu in turn explained that the fatty had brought him here and also asked if Miss Situ had any important business here. She did not explain the reason for her visit for this evening and immediately said that that man in the morning misunderstood their relationship with our hero, but the girl was going to deal with the situation. The guy immediately assumed that the guy outside the university gate Yin Lanqi was asking for his acquaintance's love. Situshu could no longer stand the fact that he was so blatantly pretending, because she was sure that he had also noticed Yin Lanqi's murderous aura. The protagonist agreed that he had captured this energy but couldn't figure out what to do with the information. The girl was still very excited because she knew that her ex-fiancé was too good at tricks, so she had to be very careful in a fight with him. Previously, Lin Mu hadn't even suspected that Miss Situ might be worried about his safety, which flattered him greatly. Situ Shu sighed heavily and admitted that she wouldn't have done all this if it wasn't for the main character's instructions for her birthday. At the end of their brief conversation, the boy thanked his acquaintance for these warnings and promised to be careful. The girl declared that she had said all she wanted to say and once again asked our hero to take care of himself. They ended up walking out of the men's room together, which looked pretty weird. The protagonist felt the most embarrassed possible about the fact that other people saw it. One guy noticed that the couple was in a big hurry and immediately assumed what kind of brazen things they were doing in the restroom. Meanwhile, on stage, the charity auction had already started, and the bid had already reached 10 million. The moderator began counting down for that price to become the final price for that lot. He then solemnly lowered the gavel and announced that the last named amount was final. It turned out that the owner of this item was Miss Lin, so the host thanked her for helping with the charity. Lin Mu had no idea that such a vase could be sold for 10 million, and his comrade Xing Weiyang explained that everyone here was a rich person willing to spend money on charity. The presenter then introduced the next lot, which turned out to be an ancient orange necklace, the value of which is that it is impossible to know the age of this artifact. Some experts have tried to use the C14 method for identification, but the composition of this necklace has never been recognized. They also say that nothing in the world can damage this jewelry. The main character froze, scrutinizing the item, his eyebrows shifting in deep thoughtfulness, while Xing Weiyang didn't really believe this information. The guy noticed that his ring's reaction had gotten even stronger since the necklace had appeared. Lin Mu began to suspect that there might be some connection between the two pieces of jewelry. The first to bid was a gentleman who was willing to buy the necklace for 5 million. Xing Weiyang was surprised that someone was willing to pay such a huge sum, and our hero was still sure that the prices would still rise. The host saw that Mr. Liu was the first to offer the first bid and asked if anyone else wanted to fight over the lot. The next to enter the fray was a girl who offered 6 million for the necklace. In just a couple of seconds, the price had already risen to 15 million and wasn't going to stop. The fight for the artifact was also still not leaving Mr. Liu, who eventually raised the bid to 20 million. The presenter immediately turned to the other participants and asked if anyone had more to offer. Xing Weiyang couldn't believe that someone would be willing to give such money for a stupid necklace.